Hey guys, how are all of you beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing great. This is in Marvel I Am God. Were Endless transmigrated the timeline of Wolverine 3 and became the last mutant of the old era. At the moment, the X-Men have long since disbanded, Mutant is no longer brilliant, Wolverine is entering old age, and the entire race is in peril. Fortunately, he found that when he watched battles he could obtain the opponent's abilities. So let's start this story, relax and enjoy. Last night, New Mexico suffered an extraterrestrial meteorite fall, and thousands of meters around it were affected and destroyed. The authorities have organized an expert mission to conduct research and investigation. On the TV, the female broadcaster broadcasts the news in a well-rounded broadcast cavity. At the same time, a photo taken at the scene emerged. Thor is coming. Endless looked at the photo on the TV news, stared at the hammer in the center of the photo, and suddenly thought of this day. At the same time, he was also interested in Thor, the Asgard bloodline. Now he already has 2 bloodlines, and he has experienced the great benefits brought by bloodlines around him. Moreover, after Endless obtains the bloodline, all the bloodlines will interact with each other and bless each other. So, he quickly set his sights on Thor's bloodline. In addition to his bloodline, Thor also has his ability, which is also a side goal of Endless. No one will dislike their own ability. Then, a rush of footsteps came from outside the door. What just happened? Is there another guy who can't open his eyes? Logan's face was solemn, and he was the first to come to Endless. Then others came one after another. It turned out that they had just heard Endless' voice bursting into the room. I thought something had happened again. It's okay, it's just that I exercised a little bit. Seeing this, Endless scratched his head and said with a smile. Endless just rushed over and scared my old man a lot. Charles silently complained. It's okay. Logan was relieved when he heard this. The tension on the faces of the others disappeared. 35. Endless nodded, thought for a while, and continued, by the way, Logan, I'm going to go to New Mexico, and I'm going to trouble you to take care of it again. Well, with your deterrence, those 523 guys probably won't make any more random moves. Logan nodded when he heard this, each more than asking something. After all, there must be a reason for what Endless is going to do. However, Logan still couldn't help but wonder in his heart whether he would wait for Endless to return this time, and his ability would continue to rise to another level. Wanda on the side, after hearing Endless' words, blinked and noticed the news on the TV. Endless, are you going to see that extraterrestrial meteorite? I would like to check it out too. 35. She pursed her lips and said immediately. Do you want to be together? No problem, what about the others? After nodding, Endless set his eyes on the others. Charles shook his head, I can't withstand too many long-distance twists and turns with an old bone. 99. I'm going to meet friends. After some struggle, Laura decided to meet the new mutant friends who had been separated for a long time. As for Pete, the moment he felt Endless' gaze, his head shook like a rattle. His impression of Endless is now becoming more and more frightened. If you let Pete go far away alone with the other party, it is better to kill him directly. It's really the kind of fear from the bottom of his heart when he gets close together, which tortures him too much. Since you are not going, then only me and Endless will go out together. Wanda saw that no one else was ready to go, and secretly glanced at Endless, and suddenly felt a little happy. I actually have the opportunity to be alone with Endless. Well, it's just the two of us who set off. Endless shrugged. To be honest, I'm looking forward to it. Wanda flashed a playful smile. Logan and Charles smiled at each other. Laura's small face frowned. As for Pete, he didn't care about his sister's interaction with Endless, but he was relieved and glad that Endless didn't have to take him. Subsequently, Endless took Wanda out with him. Wanda, come here. As he walked to the garage door, he suddenly called out to the other party. What's wrong? Wanda obediently stopped and looked back. I don't think we have to drive, there is a way to better enjoy the scenery on the road. 99. Endless began. What? Wanda tilted her head in confusion. You don't mind if I hold you, do you? 39. Endless walked over to her. Nope. Don't mind. Wanda was stunned when she heard this, her cheeks quickly reddened, and she couldn't control her heartbeat. Next second, she felt Endless' hand wrap around her. Immediately afterwards, the two actually lifted their feet off the ground and flew directly towards the sky. Endless. Wanda looked at the ground farther and farther away, first nervous, and then felt Endless behind him, but quieted down again. You can fly. Her eyes widened in surprise. In fact, Wanda will also fly after becoming proficient in ability, but now she is not skilled enough. For the matter of Endless flying, she was first surprised, and then her heart was full of surprises. Endless is flying with me. Well, I originally thought that driving could better enjoy the scenery on the road. But in hindsight, it seems that flight is more of a spectator. 35. Endless said with a smile as he led Wanda toward New Mexico flight. Home. Wanda nodded heavily, leaning back unconsciously. Meanwhile, Endless released her biological stance and wrapped Wanda in it so that she would not be affected by the airflow when telling flight. Next second. Home. Endless suddenly accelerated, and the two quickly flew out of the confines of New York City. The other side. Shortly after Endless left with Wanda. S.H.I.E.L.D. Scattered Wing Building. Inside the director's office, Nick Fury sat in his seat with a gloomy face, his hands folded in front of him, and his eyes lowered to look at the report that had just arrived in front of him. Endless, that guy, left New York. He narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. Look at the direction. The destination he is going to is New Mexico, which seems to be related to that falling extraterrestrial meteorite. 5. As SHIELD Director, Nick Fury controls the nation's and even the world's largest and smaller intelligence. Coupled with his many years of experience in handling affairs, he immediately analyzed the purpose of Endless' actions. He had seen pictures of the scene. That fallen thing is completely the shape of a hammer created by civilized creatures, and there must be a not simple origin after it. I'm afraid it's about extraterrestrial races. Endless probably also thought of this, so he became interested in that extraterrestrial meteorite. Nick Fury thought slowly, I don't know if that hammer, the things involved, will endanger the Earth. Thinking. He unconsciously raised his hand and touched the blind eye, and the other eye narrowed slightly. Hill, Barton, stop what you're doing. Followed by Nick Fury connected Hill and Barton's communications. Boss, is there anything else? Hill's voice came from the other side of the communication device. You guys go deal with New Mexico first, and Endless goes over there. 99. Nick Fury stated the main points of the task succinctly. Is it about the outer meteorite that day? Okay, I see. Well, be careful. After getting a reply from there, Nick Fury cut off the communication and leaned back. Startled. Time passes slowly. At this moment, only 2 hours have passed since Endless and the two set off. The blazing sun in the sky also came to the right place to hang in the air. New Mexico. The field where a meteorite falls. You can see that on this wasteland, there is a deep pit with a diameter of more than a kilometer. The center is exactly that day out a meteorite, or where Mjolnir fell. At the moment, many people have come to the vicinity of Mjolnir to see the strange alien objects. Many people walked up curiously and reached out to try to lift Mjolnir. However, the hammer that looked clearly small seemed to have infinite weight. No matter how strong the person goes up, with both hands clenched with all their strength, they couldn't shake the hammer for half a minute. Endless and Wanda also stood in the crowd at this time. Behind, parked after they entered the New Mexico area, rented car. Is this the extraterrestrial meteorite that fell last night? What's going on with the look of the hammer? Wanda leaned forward, her hands behind her back, her big eyes fluttering and her face full of curiosity. Then, seeing that all the people around him who could be called strong had already failed to try to shake the hammer, an old man suddenly stepped forward from the crowd. Chained the hammer to his pickup truck. I'll see if I can pull this thing away. The old man wears sunglasses, his hair is gray, and he has a lot of energy between words and deeds. Between talks. He was already in the driver's seat and started the car. Everyone focused their eyes on the final result. Boom, one by one. The engine of the pickup truck roared, suddenly accelerated, and the chains attached to the hammer were pulled straight at once. Then, but the wheels began to rotate in place, rubbing against the ground and emitting white smoke, and finally the chains were directly broken, and the car continued to jump forward violently. And the hammer remained in place, unmoving. I can't even pull a car. Oh my God, can't even pull this hammer in a car. What exactly is its origin? What kind of existence will it be? What kind of existence will it be built? Old man, are you all right? Time. Everyone onlookers were shocked by Raw, and after making sure that the old man was okay, they all turned their heads and were amazed, wondering what material this hammer fell from the sky was. It can achieve such quality. How can a hammer weigh so much? 35. Wanda watched from the sidelines for a long time, and finally couldn't help but walk to the hammer curiously. A pair of big blue eyes kept looking at them. You might give it a try. 99. Endless on the side laughed. However, he estimated that Wanda would not be able to pick up the hammer that had placed the spell on the zero. This Mjolnir appeared here only because the god King Odin tried his son Thor. The latter, who wants the mortal world to settle through war, understands that as a king, he should not take the initiative to start a war. Only when Thor understands everything can he pick up the hammer. Good. Wanda nodded, eager to try, and directly reached out her tender white hand to grab Mjolnir and exert force. Even the whole delicate little face turned red, but still failed to shake the hammer. Not really. Wanda let go of her hand and took 2 steps back, her face full of loneliness and some grievance. I'll try it too. Yeah. Seeing this, Endless smiled, touched the girl's head, also came interested, and held the hammer handle with one hand. He began to improve the strength in his hands. However, even now, with all my strength, can't I shake it? Endless looked at Mjolnir, who was still motionless on the ground, and raised his eyebrows. However, he was mentally prepared, but he did not feel much surprise. It seems that his strength is still a little worse than Odin, who put a divine spell on Mjolnir. But after thinking about it, the other party can the king of God, and now he can't compare with him for the time being, and there is no shame. Subsequently, Endless wanted to try again, if he could use the ability of the mind to touch the magic spell that sealed the hammer. Invisible's mental fluctuations suddenly spread out, enveloping the hammer. Can it actually work? Endless unexpectedly found that the moment the mind ability touched the hammer, the latter actually loosened slightly. It turns out that it can be cracked by another way of thinking. However, this has to do with the ability of his mind being too strong. After all, he is now a super brain. Plus Professor X's super brain, plus a strong mind ability to do it. This also proves that problems do not have to be solved by brute force. But at this time, above the firmament, it was as if a pair of eyes suddenly appeared, and then endless coercion swept down, enveloping him. For a time, the whole person seemed to be under the hazy sky. Endless knew Odin was watching. This guy fears he's ruining his son, thought Thor. Forget it, for Thor's Sake and bloodline, I won't compete with you first. He squinted his eyes and calculated in his heart, and immediately let go of his hand. Endless, did the hammer move just now? How did you let go? Wanda next to him saw Endless let go and asked out loud. You read it wrong, I can't do anything with this hammer. Endless said casually, let's get out of here first and find a hotel to rest. Wanda heard this, her eyes flashed, let's stay in a hotel. Yes, I can't throw you away. Endless replied. Do two people live together? Wanda looked at Endless, from head to foot, and from foot to head, and some movies that he had accidentally seen on the tape before, and only two actors starred in his mind. For a while, the expression on the little face was both nervous and expectant. It's 2 3.0 rooms, one for one person. Endless saw that the girl was cranky again, and smiled helplessly to interrupt Wanda's thoughts. With that, he turned and got into the car. When Wanda heard this, his divergent thoughts converged and he followed the car with some loss. Subsequently, Endless drove the car towards the nearest town. Shortly after the two left, S.H.I.E.L.D's cars arrived at the scene one after another. The staff who came down from above immediately dispersed the onlookers and blocked the scene. At the same time, many people are busy and start to set up temporary research institutes. And on one of the parked black cars, Hill Agent looked at the information and breathed a sigh of relief. The boss, Endless, has left here for a nearby town. Then, she turned on the communicator and reported, he is probably just curious, came over to take a look, and did not do anything else. The voice is over. Nick. Fury's voice sounded in the communicator, Hill, I remind you, Endless is an extremely cruel guy, and I hate him. But I have to admit that he is also very witty and cunning, you must be careful. Speaking of which, Nick Fury paused and added, he must have come here for some purpose. 5. It's quite possible for someone's ability. You should also pay more attention to this. The time soon came to evening. The sun is setting in the west, and the red light spreads across the earth, painting everything with a unique afterglow that belongs to the alternation of day and night. At the fall of Mjolnir, the people of S.H.I.E.L.D are busy without stopping. Endless and Wanda have arrived in a nearby desert town and found a hotel to stay here for the night. Endless opened 2 rooms under Wanda's resentful gaze. After driving the latter into the room opened for her, he met the other party's resentful gaze and said good night. 0. Then he closed the door without hesitation. This girl. Endless smiled helplessly. Through his super 5 senses, he heard the other party's dissatisfied muttering a lot next door. It is said that this girl is too young, he is not a pervert, and he can't get his hands on it. However, probably because of the tiredness of playing today, Wanda's room soon sounded the even raw suction sound after falling asleep. Endless rubbed his eyebrows and said to himself, it's time to get down to business. He hadn't forgotten that this trip to New Mexico was forethought all. The voice fell. Airplanes. An intangible mental fluctuation suddenly spread out from his mind. Now after the integrate Krypton bloodline, Endless' spiritual ability is also constantly. But in an instant, the spiritual fluctuations had enveloped the entire desert town. The next moment. Found it. Endless has scanned tens of thousands of people in the town and successfully found the goal of his trip. Subsequently, he collected his psychic ability, stood up and disappeared into the hotel room. In a desert town, in front of a pet store. A tall, muscular figure with long blonde hair was ending an argument with the clerk. Raw walked outside the store. It's a strange place, there's no horse in Midgard. As the figure walked, he couldn't help but whisper, can't you let me walk over to retrieve my hammer? Endless, who was standing on the side of the road, looked at Thor who walked in front of him, listening to the words in the other party's mouth, his brows raised and his face was strange. It's you who is weird, right? What kind of pet shop, where can I find horses? He couldn't help but complain in his heart about Thor. 03. But thinking about it, the other party is really no more familiar with the earth than he is about eating into a dead fat house in the future. Come to think of it. He suddenly looked at Thor's back and said, I listened to which place the hammer fell. Coincidentally, I'm going to, and we can go together if you want. Endless didn't mind helping the other party, after all, his purpose this time was forethought all. If he could, Endless would prefer to copy the other party's ability by peaceful means. Meantime, he also remembered that Loki would also appear tonight, but he could copy the other party's ability by the way. After all, this is also the only opportunity in this time period. Next time, if you want to see Loki, you will have to wait until the Battle of New York. The other side. Thor heard Endless' words, and a surprised smile appeared on his face. Can you stop by and go together? That's great, I'm definitely willing. 35. If someone can lead him the way, he naturally has no reason to refuse. When are you going to leave? If we can, let's go now. Thor couldn't wait. His Mjolnir is still in the wilderness, and although he is not worried that someone will steal it, he always feels uncomfortable not being around. Thor, so you sneaked up here. 55. Then, a woman's figure ran towards them. Endless and Thor twisted their heads at the same time. Hey, Jane, why are you here? We were just about to go get my hammer. 55. Do you want to go together? Thor recognized the identity of the other party, Jane Foster, the first friend he met after being banished to Earth by Odin. Simple. Foster looked at the bright smile on the handsome face opposite, and he had a headache. She wondered if she was crazy enough to believe a stranger's words. This Thor actually said that he was a god from Asgard, and that the hammer that fell earlier was his weapon. When he gets the weapon back, he will help himself retrieve what was stolen. The devil knows if he's crazy. Just want to think about it. Simple. When Foster smiled at Thor, his mouth still couldn't help but say, "If you want to go to the hammer, you can tell me, I can drive you over, there is no need to run out alone." That's really bothering you. Thor scratched his head a little embarrassed when he heard the other party's words. Saying, he pointed to Endless, he will go over with him. Ha! 35. Simple. Foster followed Thor's hand and saw Endless with a beautiful young face, and immediately wondered, who is he? Didn't you say that you don't know anyone but me? Thor and I also just met. Endless knew that the woman in front of him was already fascinated by Thor after only seeing him, and after explaining a sentence, he said in a deep voice, "With me here, you can walk to the hammer effortless. Otherwise, it will take some effort. After all, S.H.I.E.L.D. is now under the jurisdiction of SHIELD. The purpose of saying these words is naturally to keep acting with Thor and Jane. When Foster heard the words S.H.I.E.L.D., his eyes narrowed and his eyes flickered, and he suddenly became vigilant. She is very resistant to the organization SHIELD. After arriving at Mjolnir's location today, the other party forcibly requisitioned her equipment and meteorological research reports. And she was not allowed to participate in the relevant research together. Right in, Jane? Foster looked at Endless in front of him and hesitated. Hey, Jane, this friend is a warm-hearted person, and since he's willing to come with us, he has to go together. Thor, the man with a muscular brain opposite, said so emphatically. Got it, take it with you if you want. But I don't believe he can do anything with SHIELD. Simple. Foster looked at Thor's stubborn and handsome face, and reluctantly accepted the request to bring Endless. Subsequently, several people went on Jane together. Foster's car rushed towards the Mjolnir drop point. After a while, several people had already arrived outside the fall point. At the moment, S.H.I.E.L.D. has already set up a makeshift research institute consisting of white tents here. Within a radius of several kilometers, they were fenced. You two be careful, S.H.I.E.L.D. is not something to mess with. After all, they are backed by governments around the world and have privileges in many parts of the world. Simple. Foster got out of the car, glanced at the temporary scientific research institute that was still brightly lit at the moment, and couldn't help but remind. However, let's go. Endless didn't seem to take the woman's words to heart, and without looking back, he raised his feet and walked towards the research institute in front of him. Jane, you don't have to worry too much, I feel that this Endless is a reliable guy. 35. Seeing this, Thor also followed, and turned back at the same time. I must be crazy. Jane looked at the two men in front of her who were farther and farther away, and had a headache and a helpless expression. How can you sneak into SHIELD at night with two people who have only known each other for a day? Then, she took a deep look at Thor's sturdy back, and still felt that she had followed. Stop. Ahead is where S.H.I.E.L.D. Tell me who you are and where you are from. Which thinks? The temporary research institute just close to S.H.I.E.L.D. has not even entered it. There were several members of the task force in black uniforms, holding guns in their hands in order to come up. Shouted at them. Damn it. Simple. Foster looked at the muzzle of the black hole opposite, and was directly frightened to freeze in place, feeling cold all over, and his heart was extremely nervous. At the same time, he couldn't help but look at Endless, who was walking in the forefront. "Didn't you say that with you can easily enter the S.H.I.E.L.D. Institute? Why was he surrounded before he walked in?" "It's over. It seems that I am really crazy to believe the words of such people." Simple. Foster was terrified. In just 2 or 3 seconds, countless thoughts already flashed quickly in my heart. All kinds of emotions suddenly gushed out in her heart. Emotions are mixed. Simple. Foster found that Endless in front of him, even if he was pointed at several guns, he still looked like an understatement. Inexplicably, it gives people a sense of calmness. Next second. "Put down your guns, I don't want you to die here." 35. A figure carrying a bow and arrow descended from the sky and landed in front of everyone. "Yes, sir." Hearing the other party's words, the members of the contingent withdrew their guns. Endless squinted his eyes at the figure and recognized the identity of the other party. Hawkeye Clint. Barton. The other side. Hawkeye also kept looking at Endless, recalling the picture of his subordinate pointing a gun at the latter just now, and he was afraid in a cold sweat. No matter what Endless' position is, the other party's terrifying strength is not finished. If those task forces go off and shoot out a bullet, they can make the entire Temporary Research Institute, and even S.H.I.E.L.D. So Hawkeye apologized decisively. "Sorry, just now my team members are completely performing their daily duties, and they don't mean anything against you at all. I hope you can understand and forgive." 99. Hawkeye would apologize to the teenager. Didn't he say big words? Simple. Foster had been in contact with S.H.I.E.L.D. and naturally knew Hawkeye's place in it, and his heart was incredible when he saw this scene. What the hell is he coming? She looked at Endless, and the emotions in her heart had turned into doubt. Then Hill, who was tall with short hair, also walked out of it. The moment she saw Endless, a trace of vigilance flashed under her eyes, and she stepped forward with her fists clenched in her heart and a little nervously. "Sorry, it's not that they are powerless, but this place is currently under special control, and no one can enter it." Hill took a deep look at the yellow-skinned boy in front of him and said as smoothly as possible, "The hammer in this is mine. I'm going to go in and get it." 35. Thor was anxious. Pointing in the direction of the Temporary Research Institute, he loudly argued, "I'm sorry, outsiders can't go in." Hill glanced up at him, his tone indifferent, and chose to refuse without hesitation. Boom! At this time, in the gloomy sky, a rolling thunder suddenly sounded, and the electric light flashed and illuminated the entire Temporary Scientific Research Institute. "Just let him go in and try it," Endless said in a deep voice. "US.H.I.E.L.D. can't pick up that hammer anyway, can you?" Hearing this, Hill narrowed his eyes slightly, and measured what Endless said in his heart. "I don't know if I should say yes for a while. After all, she doesn't want to hate Endless now. And Endless was too lazy to talk nonsense with this woman. Let's go." He directly pulled Thor up and walked to the Temporary Research Institute. Hill opened his mouth when he saw this, but said nothing. She didn't dare to provoke Endless. As for Hawkeye, after taking a look at the other party's back, he lowered his head again and did not say a word. Simple. Foster was extremely surprised when he saw this scene, and he was even more curious about Endless's identity, and he didn't dare to provoke him for 2S.H.I.E.L.D agents in a row. Thinking, she also quickly followed. Only Hill and Hawkeye were left standing in place, their faces gloomy, daring to speak angrily. Click. The inky deep space was another thunderbolt split, and a downpour fell in an instant, drenching everything. Endless and the others soon arrived in front of Mjolnir, which had been covered by Shield with tents. "Good buddy, I'm coming." Thor looked at Mjolnir in front of him, smiled, and strode up and held out his hand. When he was banished to Earth by Odin after making a mistake, the latter sealed all divine powers. However, he thought that as long as he retrieved his Mjolnir, then everything should be restored. Then Thor's smile froze on his face. He, like everyone who tried to move Mjolnir before him, couldn't take it. How is it possible? 523 Thor couldn't believe the scene in front of him, and suddenly roared, holding Mjolnir with both hands at the same time, and the strength in his hands became heavier and heavier. Later, even all the muscles tensed and the blue muscles burst out. He clenched his teeth and his expression was hideous, as if he had used all his strength. However, Mjolnir just doesn't move and is not affected by him at all. "I really can't pick it up." Thor didn't let go until he was out of power, and took 2 steps back in quick succession, his eyes straight and dull, his face full of disbelief. A true king should not initiate war. 39. You have lost your qualifications to be king. He remembered the words that his father Odin exiled himself to Earth after he privately took people to attack the ice giants. Am I disqualified? Thor took a deep look at Mjolnir, who he could no longer hold, and walked into the heavy rain outside the open hood in a lost spirit, allowing the rain to wet him. Thor. Seeing this, Jane quickly followed. Before leaving, Endless turned his head to look at where Mjolnir was, and then walked out of the tent as well. With a biological stance, he is not afraid of being rained. A few minutes later, when everyone left the tent, the air in front of Mjolnir suddenly twisted, and a little green light appeared out of thin air, and quickly condensed into a human shape. As soon as the man appeared, he grabbed Mjolnir. This person is Loki. Unfortunately, I still can't pick it up. He tried to lift Mjolnir, but found it futile, so he had to smile helplessly. Loki, as Thor's brother, has always been not valued because of the latter's excellence. So always trying to prove himself so that Odin looks the other way. But seeing that he couldn't afford Mjolnir, Loki didn't bother too much. After all, Thor couldn't take it now. Just as he was about to leave. It's not good to enter someone's territory casually, Asgard. A voice suddenly came from behind him. Aren't you leaving? Loki was slightly stunned and turned to look. But I saw the teenager who had just followed Thor out, and I don't know when he stood behind him. Ignorant me god, you are actually my great evil man, the acting god king of the 9 realms. 35. Loki raised an eyebrow, didn't seem to care too much, raised his chin and spoke proudly. You are generally called the god of mischief with us. Endless showed a smile, slowly spoke, and then paused. No, you are generally called god of funny. 5. As soon as his words fell. You're offending the gods. Loki was already enraged, his face suddenly turned cold, and at the same time he raised his hand directly. Airplanes. The green light gathered in an instant, emitting bursts of magical power. Directly turned into arrows and shot towards Endless. The rain line connects the faces of the raw whistling rainstorm. Under a small white tent. The green magic energy condensed into a ray bloomed with terrifying fluctuations, like a monstrous wave, and instantly condensed into an arrow that could pierce all power. Next second, the space seemed to be penetrated, and ripples were emitted. On the silver hammer face of Mjolnir placed on the ground, Endless' figure is reflected, and a green arrow is also reflected towards him. The arrows are menacing. And then, Endless' figure suddenly exploded, moving half a meter to the side as if panning, sweeping with gusts of wind, easily avoiding Loki's magical attack. Battle detected, reward, Asgard magic, Loki, 99. Meanwhile, the cold voice of successfully obtaining ability sounded in his head. Another gain, plus another magic ability that belongs to Loki. Endless felt the majestic magic knowledge that appeared in his mind out of thin air, and immediately smiled heartily. You dare to despise the gods? The guy who offends Kamui will be punished. Seeing this, Loki mistakenly thought that the other party was laughing at him, and his expression was annoyed and angry. With a wave of both hands, green light spots gathered out of thin air, condensing into two short swords with flickering cold rays and inscribed with divine patterns, and slammed into Endless. Aren't you a magician? Would you foolishly choose melee combat? Seeing this, Endless couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth were smiling, only feeling that Loki's behavior was really a little funny. Presumptuous. Loki's expression became more gloomy when he heard this, and he let out a low sigh, and his figure flashed green like Mars. Burst. The next moment, he was actually wrapped in green divine power, flashing in front of Endless, and the sharp blade in his hand easily penetrated Endless' chest. How come? However, Loki found that the other party's penetrated wound did not bleed. What surprised him even more was that he actually felt the extremely familiar energy fluctuations in the young man in front of him. It's his own magic. Impossible. Absolutely impossible, 99. You're a god, you can't learn my Asgard's magic. Loki looked horrified, wondering how this could happen. Right at this moment, Endless, who was pierced through his chest in front of him, his entire body suddenly turned into golden points of light, which were easily blown away by the wind. How did you do it? You've been to Asgard before. Loki suddenly turned his head and looked at Endless, who was safe and sound behind him, his eyes flickering with doubt. It's just that your indiscriminate magic is so easy to learn. 35. I lifted my eyelids and saw through everything. Endless shrugged and said nonchalantly. Presumptuous. My magic was taught by my mother, and she is the best witch in the 9 realms. Loki scolded angrily when he heard this. Hearing that someone insulted him behind the scenes, the whole person rage was shocked, his feminine and handsome face was a little distorted, and he waved his blade again without thinking and stabbed towards Endless. The blade, condensed by magic, flickered coldly, broke through the air silently, and instantly pierced in front of Endless. Next second. Syllable. Endless snapped his fingers. The terrifying power burst out from the finger, and the air at the fingertip was directly compressed to the extreme, directly like an invisible bullet. Click. Ah! The strong airflow instantly bounced onto Loki's wrist, and with the sound of bones shattering, he let out a cry of pain, and the blade in his hand fell out of his hand. However, he is a god after all, and the injuries he suffered were instantly repaired and healed under the majestic magical energy. It's just that Loki repaired the injury on his hand before he could come to his senses. A large hand had already slapped him on the face. You. Too weak. Endless' steep voice fell softly in his ears. Followed by, Loki felt a terrifying force like a mountain pouring out, erupting in his face, and his entire body was carried backwards by his head. Rumble. The back of Loki's head collided with the ground, and suddenly the ground was smashed into a deep pit, full of cracks. Gods! But that's it. Endless withdrew his hand on Loki's face, slowly stood up straight, and looked down at the lying latter from high to low. Damn. 35. Loki endured a severe headache and gritted her teeth. He already understood that he was not the opponent's opponent at all, and unleashed the magic of escape without hesitation. The whole body suddenly scattered into a little green light, drifted directly into the torrential rain outside the tent, and then recondensed into shape. Damn scum, the wrath of the gods will not forgive you. Loki said a cruel word to Endless, and then quickly used magic to distort the space next to him, stepped into it, and disappeared into the scene. Let you go for now. Endless has the same Asgard magic as Loki, and it's easy to catch up with him. 10,000 steps back, as long as he bursts out super speed, he can also interrupt the other party before Loki can cast his magic. However, Endless did not choose to chase. After all, it's up to Loki tomorrow to get Thor back, awakening deity's power. Otherwise, even if Thor's bloodline is copied now, it is only the bloodline of ordinary earthlings. However, I also have to admire the strength of Odin's divine power. Thinking of this, Endless not only muttered with emotion, just a simple spell can make Thor immortal. Thinking. Suddenly there was a rush of footsteps outside the tent. It was Hill Agent with the people of the task force who rushed over. Since Loki used magic to block the surveillance before, they are only now seeing the real situation here through the surveillance screen. Hill Agent reacted at this time and led people closer to this side. Merely. When Hill entered the tent, Endless was long gone. On the way back, Thor looked very sad, and his face was extremely miserable. He has lost Mjolnir's approval and is no longer an Asgard god. You know, before being banished, Thor was already preparing to succeed Asgard and become the king of the entire god world. Such a gap is difficult for him to accept. I am not recognized by Mjolnir. Without divine power, I am no longer a god. Thor leaned against the window and murmured glumly. Simple. Foster had to drive while comforting all the way. Endless sat silent, he had no intention of comforting Thor. It's easy to make friends with this guy with a muscular head or fight him. Or, fine wine. There's a saying among Marvel fans that beer runs in Thor's blood. Thereupon, back in town, Endless and meteorologist Eric took Thor to a nearby bar. Endless took the lead and ordered a cup of depth charges for the big guys. At first the first glass of wine was down. Thor was still immersed in grief. Until Endless asked the front desk to bring out a more violent liquor, Thor was a little surprised. This wine is almost interesting compared to Asgard. But really fierce. And it's delicious. So, it was directly poured into a gulp. It was fine at first. Later, Thor saw Endless pour several large cups. Not to be outdone, he drank along. After all, Thor thinks that Asgard is not drunk for 1,000 glasses, how could he show weakness to a Midgard? As for Eric, he was even more reluctant to accept defeat. This scientist does not look at him as a literati, but he does not show weakness in his work. I drank an unknown number of cups. Until 3, fell 2. This competition between drinks and drinks, but it symbolizes that the competition between men has ended, and the person who did not fall is naturally Endless. He has Kryptonian blood, and this amount of alcohol is not difficult at all. In the end, Endless sent the drunken trio back, during which the two did not forget to brag to each other. Words that can only be understood by all drunkards. By the time Endless returned to the hotel, it was late at night. He noticed that Wanda next door had not woken up. It seems that this girl is exhausted today. Endless muttered to himself, did not choose to turn on the light and sat directly on the edge of the bed. Then he raised his hand. In the entire dimly lit room where he was alone, only the golden shimmer of magic was exchanged between his palms. Endless felt the change after there was an extra magic ability in his body, and his expression changed for a while, and he felt strange. Because he found that in his body, the magic element and the Kryptonian bloodline seemed to have some kind of special interaction. They are mutually exclusive. The Krypton bloodline can only absorb one energy at a time, and that is fixed star energy. This is also the reason why at this moment, the Kryptonian bloodline in Endless' body will repel magical energy. I remember hearing somewhere that the KO is full of material resistance, but there is zero magic resistance. Endless felt the changes in his body and thought slightly, but it seems that this is not the case. As a matter of fact, the KO is not a true zero demon resistance. In the comics, he also used to cast magical elements, because the fixed star energy in the large superbody of that universe was replaced by magical energy. Therefore, the source of energy of Dakeo is not limited to fixed star energy. However, after choosing one energy as a supply, its Kryptonian bloodline will begin to repel other kinds of energy. I didn't expect that the Krypton bloodline, as a bloodline, would have a dedicated side. After you choose one energy source, it doesn't change, and then you don't care about other kinds of energy. When Endless thought of this, he couldn't help but laugh dumbly. But fortunately my situation is different. He felt the magical energy and Kryptonian bloodline in his body, although they were mutually exclusive and could not blend together. But they also did not influence each other, weaken each other. On the contrary, they just maintained a clear and ignoring each other. He immediately smiled and made an inference. It is estimated that my copy ability is reconciled, so there will be no defect in my body that can only choose one or the other. 5. In such a situation, now he can use both magic and the increase brought about by the Krypton bloodline itself. In other words, now he not only has a body of steel, but is not afraid of any physical attack. In the future, magic energy will not have any effect on him again. After Endless made such a discovery, he began to look forward to Thor's bloodline even more. After all, Thor is a magician. I wonder what effect Thor's Asgard bloodline will have with the Kryptonian bloodline. Thinking, Endless lay down on the bed. After starting to look forward to it, copy the harvest of Thor's bloodline. Thinking. I don't know how long it took. Endless then slowly went to sleep. Time passes slowly. The night gradually dissipated. The sky was not yet fully bright, and the sky began to gradually turn a touch of fish belly white. Rumble. Suddenly, a violent explosion that seemed to have collapsed into a sound wave like the essence of the Tao path spread towards the town where Endless and they were staying. Endless, who was asleep, suddenly woke up, instantly turned over and sat up, his eyes full of vigilance. This guy, you actually came so early. He sighed in amazement and looked out the window hesitantly. Da. At this time, Wanda pushed open Endless' door in pajamas and ran over, with the expression on her little face also looking frightened. Not surprisingly, she was also awakened by the explosion just now, and her face turned pale. Endless, what's going on? Wanda ran to Endless and grabbed the latter's sleeve. I probably know what's coming, you wait for me here, I'll be back soon, it's okay. Endless reached out and touched the little girl's head, whispered a few words of reassurance, and then opened the window and flew in the direction where the explosion came from. Meanwhile, the sky above the entire desert town was strangely born out of thin air like ripples, sparkling and scattering around. The atmosphere of the town that had been calm in the early morning was suddenly broken at this moment. Next second, all the clouds in the sky actually began to converge towards one point, constantly twisting, forming a terrifying black cyclone. The town, which had just been slightly brightened, was once again shrouded in a layer of haze. Click! Click! The densely packed thick arc immediately erupted from the depths of the cyclone. Clicking, every sound will cause heaven and earth to tremble. It shows an extremely terrifying sense of oppression and goes towards the whole small suppression. Just when everyone fell into an unwarranted panic, I saw a huge silver figure, which suddenly slowly descended from the black cyclone above the sky. The moment that silver figure appeared, the air around it seemed to freeze. Everyone felt a sense of suffocation at this moment. The fear of the unknown in my heart is like a rushing wave, and it is impossible to suppress it. And with that silver figure, it got closer and closer to the ground. It even gives people a despair as if the sky has collapsed and is about to crush everything. God! What is that thing? In the town, everyone rushed out of the room at this moment, looked up at the figure, and sighed in despair. At this moment, everyone has only one feeling in their hearts. Destruction is coming. Death is coming. Next, Lee is good, for a second. Rumble. The silver figure that was slowly falling suddenly accelerated its falling speed and smashed into the desert clearing near the town. Boom. Suddenly, in the roar of the trembling heavens and the earth, the entire ground trembled, and rounds of extremely powerful air currents swept up huge amounts of dust, forming a terrifying sandstorm rushing towards the town. This guy. Endless floated in midair, looking at the cracks that spread for thousands of meters, the ground covered by thick dust and fog, and slowly frowned. Under his gaze, the thick dust curtain that covered the sky slowly dispersed, and finally people could see the terrifying silver figure that fell down. A humanoid being that is more than 10 meters tall, made of silver metal all around, and whose body is covered with twisted divine patterns. Its head is also composed of silver and gold, but the face and the inside of the skull are empty, and there is nothing left. Just standing there, it had a terrifying sense of oppression that spread from every corner of its body. Next second. Rise. In its body, a red flame containing a terrifying temperature suddenly ignited, filling its empty head and sweeping out from its face. As those flames rose, the temperature around them rose by a few points. The breath of destroying everything is getting thicker and stronger. In the sky, Endless took a deep breath and recognized the identity of the other party. One of Asgard's most powerful weapons. Destroyer, 35. Once level. Today's god King Odin is dressed as a destroyer to block the invasion of the celestial god group alone. The other celestial god groups in level universe were eclipsed in front of Shenhua. Now, the destroyer is back on Earth. And Asgard, which is far away from Midgard, a figure locks a small town far away through the perspective of the destroyer. He's Loki. At the moment Loki sat on the throne, holding the scepter, and a fierce cold voice flashed under his eyes, "Damn the Midgards. You're going to pay for what happened last night." Boom. One by one, a terrifying loud sound that shook the heavens and the earth descended from the heavenly firmament, turning into a wave of sound waves like the essence of the Tao, enveloping the desert town that was still in the quiet atmosphere of the early morning. All the clouds around the sky gathered at this moment, and in an instant, they twisted into a vortex of dark clouds that were extremely dark, and electric light surged. The coercion that was suppressed to the extreme instantly covered the hearts of all those who were awakened. Boom! Meanwhile, above an endless desert, the silver figure of the destroyer suddenly fell from the vortex of black clouds in the air at high speed and descended on the world. It smashed the open space not far from the desert town. The ground roared and trembled like an earthquake, terrifying. The dust and fog swept through the sky, and the circular strong wind swept out. The big crack in the Tao instantly crawled all over the kilometer distance. Such a violent vibration naturally attracted the attention of Hill Agent and others in the Temporary Research Institute. Damn! What is this? Is it Stark Industries' new Mech? Hill looked at the huge guy who looked like a god in the dust. His pupils shook wildly, and then with his manpower, he rushed to a position not far from the destroyer's fall as soon as possible. She stood in front of everyone, her face solemn. But out of professionalism, Hill took a deep breath and raised the megaphone in his hand. This robot is suspected of a mass threat weapon and has not been registered in any way. 39. I hope you identify yourself and at the same time stop the operation of weapons. Her magnetic voice, amplified by megaphones, was directed towards the destroyer. However, Hill's voice just fell. All the lines on the opposite destroyer's body suddenly lit up with golden light, instantly gathering towards its face armor part. Next second, the upper body of the destroyer leaned forward, and the face armor opened, exposing the dazzling and terrifying golden sun beneath it. Rumble! A golden laser carrying terrifying heat burst out towards the position where Hill and the others were standing. Hill felt the heat wave coming from the paving, and suddenly felt that death locked him dead, unable to move, and had to watch the laser blast towards him. Hill, be careful! Fortunately, Hawkeye next to him reacted very quickly and reached out to pull her away. The golden laser almost flew against Hill's body, smashing all the vehicles of the task force behind him into slag. As a result, many members of the surrounding contingent were also seriously injured by the splash of vehicle debris. Damn, who the hell sent it? 35. Hill looked back in horror and shocked that with just one shot, the destroyer had crushed their S.H.I.E.L.D task force. I don't know, it's just obviously not something we can handle right now. Hawkeye's tone was low and his eyes serious, and he immediately pressed the communication device and reported the situation to the headquarters of SHIELD. As for the people of the other contingents of 523, almost all of them have lost their ability to move at the moment. Hill also felt his legs weaken, and could only helplessly watch the destroyer turn around and walk towards the desert town. It seems like Endless is still in town. She looked at the back of the destroyer gradually disappearing, and suddenly remembered this in a deep voice. It looks like the trouble will be solved soon. 99. Hawkeye paused before saying, although I don't want to admit it, Endless' strength is undoubted. If even he can't solve this silver big guy, then in a short time, no one can really deal with it. Damn. When Hill heard this, he didn't refute Hawkeye's words, but just cursed in a low voice. I didn't expect the problem to depend on an outsider. Meanwhile, Asgard. Loki temporarily took the throne after Thor was banished to Earth for a mistake, with the consent of the Queen Mother. He sat high on the throne, manipulating the destroyer, thinking of the powerless expressions of Hill and the others, with a proud look on his face. Damn the gods, also trying to stop the destroyer. This is the wrath of the gods. You don't deserve it. Loki muttered with a smile, and then remembered Endless, who had insulted him last night, and suddenly his face sank, and said coldly, "Boy, I only wanted to target Thor, now you are my brother's funeral object." Words fall. His complexion suddenly turned hideous. Raw. The destroyer who was far away on the earth suddenly quickened his pace under his control. Every step can step on the ground, stepping on a deep footprint, the earth trembles and roars, carrying smoke and dust. The destroyer soon arrived in front of the townspeople, fleeing in terror. Next second. Rumble. Its face armor opened again, and the energy burst out red beams, sweeping the town's buildings. The power carried in the beam is terrifying, and the terrifying heat. In an instant, countless houses burst out, endless fire spread out, and in just an instant, a quarter of the town had turned into a sea of fire. Ah! My feet! Fuck! This damn thing ruined my house. Damn, run! This guy is terrifying. Countless people panicked, screamed, and scattered to flee. The once lively and peaceful town has become a hell on earth in the sea of fire in just a few seconds. Damn! This is the destroyer. How could it be here? Then Thor also heard the movement and rushed out of the room, looking at the familiar silver figure, slightly dumbfounded. Loki is now in control of Asgard. This thing can only be sent by him. 35. His fiancée Sif also walked out, looked at the destroyer, and said with a gloomy face, "Except for Sif and Thor's comrades, the Asgard 3 warriors Vandal, Hogun, and Wallstag also ran out, with ugly expressions on their faces. Sif and Asgard came to Thor this morning to bring him back to Asgard." Thinking about it, as soon as the words were not spoken, the destroyer came. Damn, Loki, that guy. The big fat man Wallstag clenched his fists and scolded fiercely, "In order to prevent you from returning to Asgard, he actually wants to kill you with the destroyer. Why would my brother do this? I don't understand." Thor's expression suddenly became angry and puzzled when he heard this, and he asked loudly. However, seeing the destroyer getting closer and closer, he still regained his senses. "No, it's too late to say too much. I have lost my divine power now, but I am a mortal fetus in the flesh, and staying here is just a burden." Although Thor is no different from ordinary people now, he still calmly made arrangements. "You guys drag the destroyer first, buy time, and I'll help evacuate the town." Good. The Asgard 3 warriors are Thor's comrades who have always fought side by side, and they have no opinion on the latter's arrangement. Thor's fiancée, Sif, also focuses on her head. Next second. After Thor left, several people took out their weapons and burst out their divine power to meet the destroyer. Thor, on the other hand, raced through the streets to help the residents of the town who were in a panic escape. Asgard, Asgard. Through the eyes of the destroyer, Loki sees the 4 who disobey his orders and go to Thor privately. The face is gloomy and extremely ugly. "Now I am the king of Asgard, but you are already loyal to Thor. Where am I inferior to him?" 35. Loki gritted his teeth and scolded angrily, raising his hand and waving it. Earth. On a desert town. The pace of the destroyer accelerated again after the appearance of the Asgard 3 warriors and Sif. Hum. At the same time, all the lines on the body suddenly lit up with a brilliant golden luster, and instantly gathered towards the face armor. The terrifying magic fluctuations and high temperature suddenly erupted on its body, and all the air around it was distorted at this moment. Asgard 3 warriors and Sif felt the pressure from the paving, and their faces froze. For Asgard, the big fat man Wallstag took out his weapon, the long axe, and stared at the pressure and roared. The rest of the people also took out their weapons one after another and burst out of divine power. In their view, Loki is nothing more than an opportunistic rat who is not worthy of Thor's throne at all. Rumble. In an instant, several people suddenly erupted with brilliant divine light. The 3 warriors of Asgard took a step forward, preparing to face the destroyer head-on. Sif, on the other hand, held his longsword, quickly ran towards the back of the destroyer, ready to attack from behind. Next second, the 3 warriors of Asgard flashed and rushed directly to the front of the destroyer, raising their weapons and attacking the latter head-on. However, the destroyer also took a step forward, not retreating, and the huge amount of silver arms suddenly swept away. The huge force is like a big wave crashing on the shore, the turbulence is unstoppable, and it explodes violently. Boom! Directly throw the Asgard 3 warriors out like 3 broken kites. The 3 of them can't beat it. Then, Sif had already taken the opportunity to go around behind the destroyer. For Asgard, she shouted, and the whole person leaped into the air, and the long sword in her hand bloomed with a dazzling golden divine light. Sif, as the crown princess of the god king, Odin, her long sword was blessed by the latter. Airplanes. Suddenly, a dense divine pattern flashed on the long sword, and the blade flickered coldly. Plunged forward into the back of the destroyer. Clang! With the sound of gold and iron, Sif's long sword, blessed by the blessing of the god king, barely broke through the destroyer's defenses and stabbed in. Pity. Sif Originalist's strength is not strong, and the long sword broke through the destroyer's defenses and got directly stuck in the gap on the destroyer's body. Damn it! Seeing this, she couldn't help but scold secretly, and was about to increase the force on her hand. But seeing the destroyer who originally faced her on the back, the iron armor on his body began to rotate according to each part, turning into a frontal face to her. Rumble. The destroyer was not prepared to pity the jade at all, and his big hand suddenly bombarded out. Sif was also blasted to the side of the Asgard 3 warriors. Several people lay down on the ground at the same time, their whole bodies were in pain, and they could not get up again. At this time, the destroyer took a step forward and approached several people, and the patterns on his body bloomed with more and more dazzling golden light. Immediately after, those golden lights instantly gathered on its head. Hum! The terrifying tide of majestic energy suddenly roared from the head of the destroyer and spread out in all directions. Even the Asgard 3 warriors and Sif, as gods, are terrified. It can be imagined that when the other party breaks out, they will all be buried here. No resistance. Hey, Loki, what you call the wrath of the gods is just hiding behind a big toy and not daring to show up. It's really a funny god. 99. Then, a voice sounded from behind the destroyer. The destroyer suddenly turned around. I saw a tall, well-proportioned figure flying high in the air not far away. It's endless. Thor noticed him too. Hey, friend. This guy is not something you Midgardians can provoke. 55. If you die, get out of there. 55. Immediately, Thor shouted to Endless. He knew that the destroyer had come because of him, and if something happened to him because of the destroyer, then Thor felt responsible. But it was too late. Asgard. Loki sees Endless' appearance through the eyes of the destroyer, and also hears what the latter says. His whole face suddenly turned hideous because of anger, and his eyes widened and he gritted his teeth. Damn me gods! He actually dared to anger the gods. Good. I want you to see what true wrath of the gods is. Loki's words were almost squeezed out of between his teeth, as if he was extremely angry. Directly bombard the destroyer's rays to maximum power. Airplanes. On a desert town. The destroyer's body began to emit red light, which was already terrifying enough, and at this time, it was even climbing. Endless energy suddenly converged into its face armor. The air within a radius of 100 meters had already begun to twist wildly because of the terrifying high temperature released from the destroyer's body. Look into the past. The destroyer gathered the head of the majestic energy, like a round of the great sun shining dazzlingly, bursts of energy ripples, terrifying to the extreme. Flash. Seeing this, Thor increased his volume and shouted. Next second. The destroyer's body leaned forward, and the face armor opened. Boom, one by one. The terrifying red beam formed by the convergence of endless majestic energy burst out. The air where the beam of light passed vibrated out of thin air with dense ripples. Like an angry dragon roaring and exuding endless majesty, it slammed into Endless. However, Endless stood in place, his expression calm and motionless, as if he was not ready to dodge, ready to let the beam hit him. He knew that Loki would definitely seek revenge on himself. After all, this guy has more revenge than anyone else. So the moment he saw himself, even Thor didn't care anymore, and directly let the destroyer blast at him. Unfortunately, Endless looked at the beam of destroyers that was getting closer and closer, not caring at all, and the corners of his mouth outlined a smile. A scarred. Through the perspective of the destroyer, Loki saw that Endless was not ready to hide, and felt that the other party was really ignorant and ridiculous to the extreme. Hard receiving the beam of the destroyer is simply looking for death. This guy is an idiot. He laughed out loud with disdain. Next second. Rumble. The beam of the destroyer has already hit Endless. The majestic and terrifying energy to the extreme burst out instantly. Circles of airflow scattered in all directions, and countless rubble splashed everywhere. The flames rolled and rose, and the extreme explosion was deafening, that is, together with the ground, it was shaking violently, giving birth to dense cracks in the Dow. Damn it! Thor raised his head, looked at the churning sea of fire in front of him, the dust and fog in the air, and suddenly cursed angrily. There are still people who have been affected because of themselves. He can't forgive. However, just when all the aftermath gradually dissipated, Thor's expression that was still excited before instantly stiffened on his face. He couldn't believe his eyes. That boy in Midgard, after enduring a devastating bombardment that had been brewing to the extreme from the destroyer, it was still flying in midair. This. How is it possible? Learn about the Asgard 3 warriors and Sif of the destroyer's power, and see Endless not only standing still. Even the clothes were not the slightest fold, and they were also in a sluggishness. If it weren't for the ground around the other party, it would have become fragmented and messy, and the air was filled with gunpowder smoke that had not yet dispersed. They may even suspect that nothing had happened. Next second, the figure broke through the thick white smoke in front of him and came to the oblique side of the destroyer, condescendingly overlooking the silver-white battle armor below. It is bathed in the scorching sun and has no wrinkled coat. The eyebrows revealed a divine majesty, and it was clearly a young man of 18 or 19 years old. But there is a sense of oppression that makes people bow down. Judging the two of them with teenagers who liked to joke before. He is now like a majestic Tarzan, looking down on everything. Endless said slowly, "Loki, you don't seem to be good at this toy." Asgard. After Loki saw Endless' unharmed posture through the perspective of the destroyer, rage's expression suddenly froze on his face. The roaring voice stopped abruptly. It seems that a big invisible hand suddenly grabbed his neck, not only making him unable to say any words. Even the raw suck uncontrollably becomes heavy come up. He resisted the rays of the destroyer. It can even be said that it has not been affected at all. This guy. Loki felt her voice tremble a little. Is this guy really a god? Joke. One of the most powerful weapons of the destroyer called Asgard, the power it displayed was that Loki, as a god, did not dare to resist. And that guy not only came in and carried it down, but didn't even hurt at all. Loki couldn't even help but doubt her eyes over and over at this moment. The other side. 9 realms Midgard, Earth. Thor witnessed this scene and his mouth was open for a long time. Don't know what to say. Last second. Still let Endless dodge away, otherwise he will die at the hands of the destroyer. Unexpectedly, only a few seconds had passed. Thor's face was cracked. Endless. How did you do it? Thor came to his senses and muttered incredulously. That's the destroyer's strongest blow. Even when he still had divine power, he didn't dare to deal with it head-on. But Endless just stood in place, and didn't even seem to make any movement at all, just letting the beam of the destroyer bombard his body. And there were no injuries at all. Even the clothes on his body did not have any impact. Such a scene, even for Thor, the eldest prince of Asgard, was extremely shocking. Meanwhile, always hiding in the distance, Jane, who did not leave. Foster, looking at Endless, who was floating in the air like a god. A small mouth also opened in shock, and its eyes were straight. This Endless. Is it really human? No wonder the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. were so scared of him last night. I already imagined what would have happened if the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. had dared to do something to him. She couldn't help but mutter. Although Jane Foster has no concrete idea of how horrible the destroyer really is. But after the destroyer came, the damage caused was also seen by her. The beam that this guy just shot easily destroyed a quarter of the town. Such a power is undoubtedly completely impossible for ordinary people to withstand. And even if nothing else, the aura emanating from Endless alone was enough to make people feel deeply oppressed. Thinking. Simple. Foster's gaze at Endless became more and more complicated. And more in awe. And Vandal, one of the 3 warriors of Asgard, looked at Endless' back and was even more in awe. He's a real warrior. His eyes flickered, and he couldn't help but surprise Raw. Meanwhile, Loki, who manipulates the destroyer, has turned the shock into irritation over time. He felt that he had lost face, and was so humiliated by a lowly Midgard. The feminine and handsome face suddenly became more and more distorted. Damn guys. Do you really think that this can really challenge the gods' Waiming? I'll tell you. Impossible. He roared angrily and raised his hand again, ready for the destroyer to attack. Hum. Far away in the gap of the body of the destroyer of the earth, a crimson brilliance once again lit up, and the majestic energy was once again ready to gather in the head. Yet the next second, raw, Endless' figure suddenly exploded, and the air around him that had just begun to heat up was pulled by the high-speed movement that he turned into a residual image, turning into a fierce wind. He came to the destroyer in an instant. Super strength erupted and suddenly threw his own punch. Rumble. The mighty power suddenly exploded under his punch. The surrounding air was directly blasted out of a vacuum with his punches. The endless wind suddenly swept in all directions. And the destroyer suffered a heavy punch in the chest, and the breastplate that should have been extremely strong suddenly twisted and collapsed, and the entire behemoth body was blasted off the ground and flew out thousands of meters upside down. Boom! Pieces of buildings were destroyed one after another under the pouring of the destroyer's behemoth body, and the rubble splashed and dusty into the sky. Endless, on the other hand, looked at the destroyer who fell in the ruins and shook his head. It seems that this destroyer, without the blessing of Odin's power, is not the same thing at all as the destroyer who blocked the celestial god group back then. It's a world of difference. He recalled Odin's previous feelings of oppression projected on the sky. I couldn't help but muttered in my heart. And Loki's continuous attacks really made Endless feel a little unhappy. At the same time, he was also a little impatient. After all, the purpose of this time is Thor's bloodline. There is no time to spend time with the destroyer. But it all seems to have been arranged by Odin today. If I forcibly intervene and cause Thor's death, will he also regain the power of awakening Thor? Thoughtful. Endless set his sights on Thor. The latter felt the gaze projected by the other party towards him and frowned slightly. Thor always felt that looking at his eyes was wrong, and his heart was furious. The other side. Simple. Foster's nymphomaniac friend beside him, Louise's charming face showed a smile, and asked Thor, "That flying little brother is your friend?" 5. As you speak, you can feel a charm of spring water ticking out of your eyes. Thor didn't speak when he heard this. If he hadn't seen Endless' horror now, he would naturally say that the other party was his friend without hesitation. But now, Thor wasn't even sure what Endless meant by looking at him. In short, he vaguely felt that Endless seemed to have some kind of evil intention for himself. And just when Thor's thoughts did not fall. Raw. Endless, who was clearly still a few hundred meters away, suddenly turned into an afterimage and burst in front of him. Thor, do you want to regain your divine powers? He looked at Thor, who had a puzzled gaze, and asked with a smile. It's nature. 35. Thor narrowed his eyes, a little unsure of Endless' position and motives, but answered truthfully. So do you think you're ready for the sacrifice now? Endless continued to ask. You better say it, what do you want to do? Thor narrowed his eyes, wondering why the other person would ask such a strange set of questions. Although Endless did not get a direct answer from the other party, he still got the answer through the mind ability. As a matter of fact, Endless was testing Thor's mental activity. After all, he wasn't sure if he was right to forcibly intervene to make Thor sacrifice. But he knew that according to the original book, Mjolnir would approve of Thor precisely because the other party was ready to sacrifice himself for his friend. Apparently. After the test just now, Endless had sensed that Thor was ready. So, he stretched out his hand and slapped Thor's shoulder and held it tightly, looked at the latter calmly, and said in a deep voice, "It will be as you wish in a while." 5. Thor listened to Endless' words and felt the power of his shoulders. For juvenile behavior. His deep sapphire-like eyes revealed puzzlement. Endless, what are you going to do? Jane on the side. Foster is not full of muscles. Thor, sensing the abnormality and running forward to stop it. But as soon as she spoke, Endless' hand on Thor's shoulder on the opposite side had already suddenly exerted his strength and picked up Thor with one hand. Endless' current strength is far beyond the existence of the early superpower, if only in terms of strength. There are few people on the earth today who can even compare to him. And after all, Thor's divine powers were sealed. Although he had exaggerated muscles, he was still in the category of ordinary people. Therefore, although he had already reacted when Endless suddenly exerted his strength, he tensed his muscles and exerted all his strength to resist. But not Endless' opponent at all. So, Thor had no room to resist and was smashed into the destroyer who had just risen. When Endless threw him out, he also used extremely heavy force. His entire figure suddenly appeared in the air, carrying the billowing wind, almost turning into an afterimage and smashing out fiercely. Roar! Bang! But in a blink of an eye. Thor had already smashed on the destroyer's incomparably hard body and screamed, and suddenly his head broke into blood, and it seemed that his head was bursting into brain pulp. Then the whole person fell to the ground, the breath quickly withered, and soon there was no raw sucking. Everything happened too fast. Time. There was silence. No one expected that things would go in this direction. And Endless raised his eyebrows, and he also felt a little surprised. Hey, doesn't this trick of flying Thor work? Why hasn't he moved? Is it really gone? He couldn't help but wonder in his heart. According to Endless' vision, be prepared to sacrifice yourself in Thor. When his life is in danger, Mjolnir will recognize him again, and at the same time, he will also regain his divine power and become the Thor who controls the power of the thunder and lightning. Oh! It didn't seem like things were going the way he expected. However, Odin sealed Thor's divine power, and naturally has the means to resurrect him, but there is no need to worry about Thor really. Gaga. The other side. Asgard. Thor. Through the perspective of the destroyer, Loki looked at Thor, who was lying on the ground in a pool of blood and gradually cold, and was also stunned. The whole person's body was trembling, and even the eye sockets were a little uncontrollably red. The pupils trembled, full of disbelief. His fists clenched unconsciously, and anger suddenly ignited under his eyes. Damn! Meanwhile, desert town. Simple. Foster came to his senses and scolded Endless, "What have you done?" And her friend Louise was even more frightened and did not dare to continue talking. 0. Asking for flowers. 0. As for the Asgard 3 warriors and Sif, they were also angry. They clenched their weapons and looked at Endless warily. "So you're with Loki, 99. Sif looked at her fiancé's corpse and roared furiously. Roar! Right at this moment, the destroyer suddenly walked towards them, emitting a terrifying oppression and interrupting the confrontation of everyone. Endless looked at the destroyer, who came over and narrowed his eyes. "I advise you to get out of here quickly, because I feel a strong anger." At the same time, what he didn't say was that this anger also surprised him. Because Endless could feel that this anger came from Loki. Is Loki angry that I caused Thor's death? Shouldn't this kid have feelings for his brother? He can kill Thor, but no one else can. Endless couldn't help but complain in his heart. The destroyer on the opposite side had already picked up his pace. Yet at this very moment, the dark clouds in the sky suddenly swept up, and Mjolnir, who originally fell to the ground, automatically leaped into the sky. Bang! A pillar of lightning light that was enough to illuminate the heavens and earth and penetrate everything suddenly burst towards Thor on the ground. That pillar of lightning contained a terrifying power that was enough to destroy the heavens and the earth. As soon as it appeared, everyone immediately felt a feeling of extreme danger. Heaven and earth are roaring and trembling. 99. There was a roar. Thor, who was originally lying on the ground, suddenly opened his eyes, and there was a brilliant thunder in his eyes. The momentum is amazing. He reached out and took the Mjolnir that flew towards him in the endless thunderlight, and stood up in the air. The divine power in his body like a sea of stars finally broke through the seal and re-overflowed in all corners of his body. All injuries are repaired in an instant. The clothes on his body also changed into Thor's silver armor with the bloom of divine power. A red cape flutters, majestic. Majestic. The thunder light disperses, heaven and earth, goodbye light. Thor, 99. Everyone was attracted to all eyes at this moment. The destroyer, controlled by Loki, also stopped in place. I am the glory of the gods of the north. Thor. Thor bathed in the gaze of everyone, holding up Mjolnir, roar and shouting. The whole person exudes the majesty of the gods who are not angry and arrogant and inviolable at this moment. Rumble. Next moment. Endless thunderlight suddenly erupted from him. Brilliant and terrifying. Thor burst into front of the destroyer in an instant. Countless arcs wrapped around the Mjolnir and smashed out. Rumble. The turbulent divine power overflowed, like the boundless waves of the angry sea, and it was impossible to stop it. Just one hit. The destroyer was smashed to the point of rifts and falling apart. Bang, exploded into pieces. Asgard. Thor. Why? You're still back. Feeling that he had lost contact with the destroyer, Loki took off his helmet and slammed it into the ground in great exasperation. He could imagine Thor returning. He has not sat on the temporary throne for 2 days, and he has to return it to Thor. And the person who the father really cares about when the king arrives will also become Thor. Thor deserves to die in the mortal world, and coming back will only embarrass Asgard. Meanwhile, on Earth, Thor is actually resurrected. Moreover, he really didn't lie to me, he really is a god. Simple. Foster looked at Thor, bathed in boundless thunder, shocked, and his eyes flickered. Everyone except for her, was in shock. The Asgard 3 and Sif couldn't be more excited. Thor is back. They thought happily. Right at this moment. After Thor smashed the destroyer, the thunder light on his body still did not disperse. His eyes shining with blue electric light turned to endless. Rumble. The next moment. He actually directly threw out the Mjolnir wrapped around endless arcs and smashed into endless. Roar. Mjolnir came out of his hand, and on the hammer body, all the lines bloomed with brilliant divine light at this moment. Endless arcs shine and bloom with the power of thunder that is enough to destroy everything. Hammer roared over, it seemed that he couldn't even bear the space, and he couldn't stop shaking. Thor. When everyone saw this scene, they were immediately shocked. Marvel at Thor's combat strength after recovery, but at the same time feel that Endless can't avoid the attack from Thor. After all, the other party is the best warrior in the 9 realms for nearly 1,000 years. However, when the electric Mjolnir slammed into Endless, the power of brilliant thunder was thrilling. Break the space. It's just that. Next second. The crowd saw a scene that shocked them. I saw the young man raise his hand depictorially and hold the flying Mjolnir. Instantly. Endless electric light bloomed brilliantly, like a spider web densely spreading throughout the space. and the hammer is connected without moving. Everyone froze in place. To know. That is a hammer that only those who are approved by the God King can gather. Roar. Mjolnir blasted through the air and headed straight at Endless. The brilliant thunder light burst through the long sky, like endless thunder power, filling the place where the eye could reach. It exudes an endless sense of destruction, a sense of destruction. Countless arcs beat, each of which seems to carry the horror that wipes out all life. Everyone present saw this scene and immediately held raw sucking. Jane Foster, who was standing beside him, hurriedly retreated. Thor used this hammer just now, but directly shattered the extremely hard destroyer. Naturally, they know the power of the hammer. The informed Asgard 3 warriors and Sif were a little nervous, knowing that Mjolnir could only be lifted if it was recognized. If it is not recognized, the front is either dead or injured. However, Endless looked extremely indifferent. He slowly raised his hand, white as jade knuckles, and collided with Mjolnir. Rumble. Endless electric light burst out instantly, shining on the sky and the earth and dyeing everything white. The aftermath of the terrifying collision spread out in an instant, and the surrounding environment suddenly flew sand and stone dust and fog. Fuck. Raui's Asgard's 3 warriors and female warrior Sif couldn't help frowning, stimulated by the blazing light, and subconsciously raised their hands to block their eyes. Not to mention Jane Foster and Eric and Louise, 3 ordinary people. They couldn't look directly at the intense thunder lightning. On the contrary, Thor, who threw out Mjolnir, squinted slightly. His handsome face reflected a layer of white light, but his solemn expression could not be concealed. He was able to see everything that was happening in the white light. On the other side, in the midst of intense thunder. The moment Endless' hand touched the Thor hammer, the sound of receiving a reward suddenly sounded in his mind. Constantly echoing in my mind. Battle detected, rewarded, Asgard royal bloodline, Thor. It's done. When Endless heard this, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. The purpose of coming to New Mexico this time is to get the bloodline of Thortos 527. That is, the bloodline of the Asgard royal family. He once saw in a comic issue that Thor's bloodline is far better than Odin's. Because the Asgard people are truly strong and inherited, the bloodline of one generation will be better than the next, and their strength will increase exponentially with age. Other words. If Endless' strength has reached the Silver Super period. With the blessing of Asgard's bloodline, it is even possible to go to the next level. That's the power of the Asgard bloodline. The longer you live, the older you get, the more demonic you get. The Krypton bloodline, on the other hand, has no upper limit. As for the Hulk bloodline, it is a bit of an evolution towards the immortal Hulk. If this is the case, then the target is immortality. No one can kill the immortal Hulk, he is everything under everything. Thinking of this, Endless was a little excited. He was looking forward to what kind of bugs would arise between the bloodlines. So much so that he ignored the thunder rushing around him and the impact of Mjolnir. Anyway, he didn't take this in his eyes. After all, he had a body of steel and a biological stance, and he didn't care about these lightning attacks. Besides, he has Loki's magic and James Lowe's lightning ability. These are not to be feared by him at all. Moreover, it seems that Thor didn't use much force. Thoughts fall. Endless pinched Mjolnir's hammer and flicked it gently. Roar. All the shining arcs around him were immediately dispersed by him. Sure enough, I stopped. It's just. How can it be so easy? Endless strength is really beyond my imagination. 35. When Thor saw that Endless stopped his Mjolnir with only one hand, and the clothes on his body were still not affected in the slightest, and he did not even waver in his face, I couldn't help but shrink my pupils. Thor knew that Endless suddenly started to help himself, all to help himself. And the result is indeed as the latter said, his divine power broke through the seal. Therefore, he threw a hammer at the other party, completely wanting to try his own recovered divine power. By the way, take a look at the strength of this Midgard friend. And it didn't take much force. But seeing Endless still accept his attack so easily still shocked Thor. Meantime, Thor's gaze lingered on the Mjolnir that Endless was holding in his hand. The shock under his eyes suddenly became more intense. I tried my best to regain the approval of the hammer, but this guy Endless actually did it easily. 39. Thor's face suddenly became complicated. Endless noticed the change in Thor's expression, all sensing the latter's mood, and immediately put down the hammer and smiled. This is my special ability, not recognized by the hammer, he explained with a smile while picking up the hammer. Click. It was actually directly unleashed a thick lightning bolt and slashed at the ground in front of Thor. Seeing this, Thor couldn't help but take a step back unconsciously, watching Endless' expression become more complicated. Then, Endless also threw the Mjolnir in his hand towards the other party. Thor took the hammer, his eyes flickering. I didn't believe Endless' words at all. He always felt that this teenager exuded an indescribable strange aura all over his body, too mysterious to figure it out. However, Thor did not choose to continue to ask on this question because of the doubts in his heart. His emotional intelligence is a little low, but he also knows that everyone has secrets that they don't want to reveal, and there is also an invisible line that cannot be easily crossed. What's more, the other party is still a person whose strength is not weaker than his own in the slightest. Well, thank you, Endless. 35. Thor thought, and smiled brightly at Endless. To be honest, the way you helped me just now startled me, but fortunately it succeeded in the end. 95. Then, Jane in the distance. Foster came over and looked at Thor at the moment cautiously. Are you really okay now? When she opened her mouth to ask, she couldn't help but swallow her spit and looked at Thor's body from top to bottom. I'm in good shape right now, full of divine power. Thor's face smiled even more when he heard this, and he raised his palm to flash with electricity. Then, after everything was over, Hill and the others finally arrived late with the few remnants of the defeated army. She looked at Thor, a hint of seriousness flowing between her eyebrows. The latter's performance after retrieving his divine power was seen by her. At this moment, Thor is already a dangerous existence, no less dangerous than Endless in the heart of the Hill agent, so she can't be careless. On behalf of S.H.I.E.L.D, I need to know who you are in order to keep the planet safe. Hill asked after taking a deep breath. Don't worry, this is my promise on behalf of Asgard. Thor did not answer the other person's question directly, but said so. Then, he looked at Endless. Endless, I'm going back first. My friend from Asgard told me that Loki had messed up the whole Asgard and that I had to go back and deal with it as soon as possible. After that, when I have a chance, I will come and have a good drink with you. 35. Hearing this, Endless nodded. See you next time. 55. It could be seen that Thor was really anxious. After a short exchange of words and 2 sentences, he, the 3 warriors of Asgard, and Sif suddenly appeared under their feet. Next second, a brilliant pillar of light fell from the sky to envelop them. Wait until the light wears off. Thor and the others had already disappeared in place. Endless looked at the place where they disappeared and knew that the other party had returned to Asgard through Bifrost, who could teleport freely in the 9 realms. And Hill Agent watched them leave, but did not dare to say anything. Until after Thor's party left. Only then did she look at Endless, take a deep breath, and cautiously asked, "Endless, have you copied the ability of this so-called Asgard person?" Hill's move opened his mouth for another purpose. That is to test the depth of his hostility to S.H.I.E.L.D. through Endless' answer. All he did before was it that he really wanted to go against SHIELD, or just because of Nick Fury's order infuriated him. Endless heard the tall woman in front of him, revealing intellectual elegance, ask himself and smile. "If you really want to know, you can choose to come to my room tonight after washing, and I can spend the night slowly telling you." He immediately teased. Hill never expected to get an answer like this, pulled his mouth, and suddenly cooled his face. "I wish Mr. Endless a happy nightlife." As soon as she finished speaking, she immediately turned around and left. At the same time, I was uncertain in my heart, and I couldn't figure out what kind of person Endless was. The other S.H.I.E.L.D. people saw it, naturally did not stop too much, and stepped forward to follow. Endless looked at the figure of Chien who left, but thought this Hill was quite interesting. Unlike Natasha Romanov, every move exudes charm that leaks from the bones. Hill is a bit cold, heroic, and capable. How to describe it? There is a feeling that you can only watch from a distance, and you can't play indecently. However, such a woman is more interesting to conquer than the kind of woman who is picked by the king. Endless was thinking. The phone in my pocket suddenly rang. He took it out and saw that it was Kim and the phone called. "What's the matter?" Endless picked up the phone. "Endless, what you gave me last time has come to fruition." A deep voice sounded on the other end of the phone. "Find the group of people living underwater on the south coast. Now you can give you the relevant information, or you can send someone to take you directly." "Did you find it so quickly?" When Endless heard the other party's words, he raised his eyebrows and secretly sighed that Jin and the efficiency were really efficient. "I'm still in New Mexico now, I'll talk about it later." Kim replied, "Okay." Hang up. Endless was lost in thought. Previously, he asked Kim to go to the south coast to find the people who lived under the sea, which were actually Atlanteans, that is, Aquaman Namor. Once one of Marvel's big three. Moreover, Aquaman is also a mutant zero. Endless did this because he wanted to co-opt it and become part of his empire. He intends to build a vast empire over the heads of the world. Empire of Mutant. And the construction of the empire naturally cannot rely on Endless alone. His future strength can become the core of an empire, but in the end, a behemoth is inseparable from the cornerstone of ability. Therefore, Endless will contact many people who can be used through various methods. Take Aquaman Namor, for example. Then again, Endless' natural variant, ability, is able to survive underwater raw sucking, and the ruins control water slightly. From a certain point of view, there is a certain fate with Aquaman Namor. If you have time later, you can go to Atlantis. 35. Endless thoughts came here, and he suddenly became interested and couldn't help muttering. Subsequently, only then did he notice that there were several pairs of fearful eyes on the side, looking at him. It's Jane Foster and her friends. Just now, Thor and the others, as well as SHIELD people came and went, and Endless forgot their existence for a while. I didn't expect them to leave yet. At the moment Jane Foster was looking at him with extremely complicated eyes, wanting to stop talking. And his best friend Louise, after seeing Endless's deterrent power, and then looking at the latter, there are no other ideas, only fear, is quietly pulling Jane Foster's sleeve, wanted her to leave quickly. Endless, isn't Asgarda far away? Will I still have a chance to meet Thor? Simple. Foster struggled for a long time, but chose to speak. Endless laughed dumbly when he heard this. This girl endured her fear of herself, just to ask this question. Love is such a thing, it is really not clear. And he said, Asgard is really far from Earth. But if you do have a relationship with Thor, I think you'll see you again. 35. Saying that, he paused for a moment and continued, now that everyone in the town has taken refuge, and now there is no suitable infrastructure in the town, you should leave quickly. 5. Simple. After hearing Endless's words, Foster's eyes were complicated and he didn't know what he was thinking. Then, she took a deep breath and said seriously, okay, I know, thank you. Endless nodded and looked at Jane. After Foster left, he also walked to the hotel where he stayed last night. When he stood in the doorway of the hotel, looking at most of the town that was in ruins, he felt that Wanda was still waiting for him inside. He immediately quickened his pace and walked to the hotel. Just push open the door. Endless. You're finally back. 99. Wanda's voice trembled, and while Raw shouted, he couldn't wait to rush towards him. Endless felt the girl's soft body trembling constantly, and knew that she was frightened. Look up at the chaotic street outside. He immediately sighed. Although I did fulfill my promise not to let the destroyer hit here. But while everyone else is running out, Wanda is still waiting for me here. This girl. It's really overdone. Thinking. Endless sighs suddenly softened 3.0 and stroked Wanda's back. Well, it's okay, I'm back. Well, I know, I'm not afraid when you come back. Wanda murmured, tightening the force on her hand. Endless had a very good smell wafting from his nose, noticed that the temperature in his chest was slowly rising, and secretly smiled bitterly. No push away. The more times, the more adaptation. What's more, adapting now is also about preparing for later. Endless whispered a few more words of reassurance, and when the girl's mood stabilized, he took her out of here. After they flew towards New York and left the hotel. Not far from the hotel, on the balcony of the mobile house, a little golden starlight suddenly appeared out of thin air. Those golden starlights coiled in the air, and there were more and more of them. As a result, the golden lines condensed, outlined and intertwined with each other, slowly forming a circle that swirled and sputtered countless golden rays. In the center of the ring, bursts of spatial fluctuations suddenly dispersed. Next second, a bald woman walked slowly out of the gradually expanding ring. She is dressed in yellow Taoist clothes, her complexion is as rich as jade, and her facial features give people a sense of intimacy at the same time, but also reveal a feeling of supreme majesty, inviolable. A pair of black eyes seem to contain a universe full of stars, so deep that it seems to be able to see through everything. After the bald woman came out, she looked up at Endless's figure that disappeared into the sky, her brows furrowed and solemn. The appearance of this little guy Endless, I don't know if it will affect the progress of the timeline. If Endless was here, he would definitely recognize the other party and would regret walking so fast. Because this woman is Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One. Hidden in the Earth's timeline Asgardian. one of the most powerful beings on Earth. Now she's eyeing Endless near the Himalayas. At the moment, it was late autumn, and everything around had been whistling with raw wind months earlier. The sky is even more gloomy and dim, piling up heavy dark clouds that have not cleared for days, and there is a continuous falling snow. There is a town located here, shrouded in a cold wind, and the seemingly endless wind whistles and whistles the snow. Through the thick curtain of snow that seems to be endless, you can see that the streets of the town are empty. This is Kathmandu. In such a season, if there is nothing to do, no one will choose to go out, and everyone stays at home to warm up and rest. And Kamataj. This mysterious place, which only a very few people know, is hidden in Kathmandu. There are many transcendent cultivators living here, and most people in the world have only heard of in legends. At the moment, in Kamataj's dojo, golden stars appeared out of thin air, and then a golden ring suddenly expanded. If anyone could look into the golden ring at this moment, they would see that opposite the ring was New Mexico, a desert town that had been destroyed by the destroyer. This is a spatial channel that connects thousands of miles of space. Next second, a figure walked out of it with unhurried steps. It's a bald woman. It was Endless, Ancient One magician that had just appeared in New Mexico. And since she met Endless, her tightly locked brows have never relaxed until she returns. Recently she noticed fluctuations in the timeline. And the source of the fluctuation is Endless. After in-depth investigation, Ancient One magician accidentally discovered that Endless' life trajectory had changed somewhat from the original established route. Endless in this period should still be at the bottom of human society and trying to survive. How did he become such a powerful existence now? Ancient One magician recalled the information he observed from the timeline, and there was a rare look of puzzlement in his deep eyes. She couldn't understand why there was such a sudden change. And even after looking for many details, without missing any 03 cobweb horse traces, I did not find any power to interfere in Endless' life. But the other party's performance now is so abrupt and inconsistent with its established planning route. This is also the reason why Ancient One magician will choose to go directly to observe Endless up close. After all, everything in this universe is planned, and the appearance of Endless may change the course of the timeline. But fortunately, it seems that all the time nodes have not been changed because of Endless. Ancient One magician muttered as he recalled what he had seen in Endless. The time node has not changed. It means that everything that should happen on the timeline will still happen when the time comes. Even if it's death. Let's hope there won't be any surprises. 35. Ancient One magician looked up at the snow, took a deep breath, and said in a deep voice. She still had a doubt in her heart. That is, I still don't know what Endless changes are causing today. Meanwhile, New York. In front of a long-abandoned college, several cars belonging to S.H.I.E.L.D. are parked. Nick in the car. Fury, looking through the car window at the plaque on the main entrance of the college. There are several fonts on it that have fallen off. Xavier Genius Academy. These words, placed in America a few years ago, can be called important words. The famous X-Men took root from here. Unfortunately, something significant happened next. The X-Men exist in name only. The founder of this school, the brightest brain in the world, has also become a threat to end peace at any moment because of Alzheimer's. Come to think of it. Nick. Fury sighed. However, when Endless' indifferent face appeared in his mind, he felt that it was a fatal mistake to completely erase Mutant without paying all the costs. As a result, there is now another guy who could end peace at any time. Endless. Suddenly, Nick Fury's eyes showed a strong sense of hatred and anger. Your good days won't last long. 359. Knock knock. Nick Fury was still on his mind. A subordinate came outside the car and knocked on the window to bring him back his mind. Head, we have found the entrance to the basement of the Xavier School. The subordinate who came over said respectfully. Okay, take me there. Hearing this, Nick Fury immediately got out of the car and followed his men into the gate of the Xavier Genius Academy. As a result of the fighting many years ago, the entire academy was devastated, and the ground was broken everywhere. Many houses are also cracked or collapsed into ruins. Nick Fury followed his hand all the way. Soon came to a house that had completely collapsed into ruins. But as he came, dozens of SHIELD men have already cleared the piles of house rubble, revealing a rusty iron gate. Through the heavy rust, you can see that the surface of the iron door has the shape of an X font. Boss, the brainwave strengthening machine you're looking for is right below. The subordinate next to him spoke again. Hear this? Nick Fury took a deep breath, and a chill flashed under his eyes. That's right. He came here for the brainwave strengthening machine buried in the low level of Xavier Academy. The origin of this machine is extraordinary. It was designed by former Mutant director Beast Hank and created by Charles and Magneto Eric. This brainwave strengtheninger is able to strengthen Charles' mental fluctuations, increasing it to an extremely terrifying level. Charles once relied on the growth of this machine and had countless crises with it. Even with the help of the brainwave strengthening machine, he can even kill everyone on the planet at the same time. There was an attempt to use Charles' ability to kill everyone on Earth with machine amplification, which brought great panic to the entire planet. Fortunately, those who ended up failing. And now, Endless, I think you'll love this gift. Nick Fury looked at the iron gate in front of him that had been sealed for a long time and muttered. He specially asked people to find this brainwave strengthening machine in order to use it against Endless. Okay, open the door quickly. The thought fell. He suddenly urged his subordinates a little impatiently. After all, this machine has been silent here for years with the Xavier Genius Academy. Although theoretically, the machine designed and built by several top mutant will not be a problem. But Nick Fury felt that he still had to see the confirmation with his own eyes to make people feel at ease. Bell bell. Just as his subordinates listened to him and began to pry the door, the mobile phone rang. Nick Fury glanced at the call from the Hill agent over the S.H.I.E.L.D. intranet. Seeing this, he quickly picked it up. The other party's mission is to go to New Mexico and keep an eye on Endless while dealing with the extraterrestrial meteorite incident. Calling so soon is most likely related to Endless. So Nick Fury picked it up quickly. Hill. Boss, Endless has copied another ability, and the source of capability seems to be Thor from Asgard. Just got the phone. Nick. Before Fury could speak, he heard the Hill agent report directly. Meantime, Hill was quick to recount everything that happened in New Mexico today. As she tells, Nick Fury's brow furrowed deeper and deeper. When Hill's report ended, his face was solemn and heavier, and then he said, "You and Barton go back to headquarters first, and I will discuss this matter when I go back." Good. Hill on the other side of the phone seemed to have some desire to talk about the topic of Endless, but in the end he just answered. Then he hung up. And Nick. When Fury put away the phone, his already dark face looked 3 points darker. The eyes are gloomy, and the more the brows are locked. Endless has gained a new ability. And it's also from Asgard, Thor's ability. Maybe others don't know, but Nick Fury knows a little about the 9 realms. Although the so-called Asgard people are actually aliens, they dare to claim to be the divine court in the 9 realms, and naturally have strong enough strength. However, their strength is visible to the naked eye, and Thor alone has defeated a large army of humans. Therefore ability should not be underestimated, in comparison. Human beings are too small. Endless has become stronger again. 995. Nick. A flash of anxiety flashed under Fury's eyes. When he learned of Endless ability, he expected that the latter who copied ability would surely grow into an extremely dangerous existence in the future. But Nick. What Fury never expected was that Endless grew up too fast. It's outrageously fast. When this kid first appeared in his field of vision, he already had a psychic ability comparable to a nuclear bomb. Later, it has more and more abilities, and it is more and more terrifying. Now it has begun to copy the ability of the gods. Nick Fury can't imagine how far Endless can grow if left unchecked. He has a feeling that this guy may not take much time to grow to the point where only Captain Marvel can handle it. Pressing. Time is running out. Whatever means are used, he must be disposed of as soon as possible. 35. Nick Fury's jealousy of Endless suddenly became deeper. Click click. Right at this moment. Thanks to the efforts of several S.H.I.E.L.D members, the iron door that had been sealed for a long time was finally opened. As soon as the door opened a gap, you could feel a smell of decay rushing towards you. Let's go. 99. Nick. Seeing this, Fury gently covered his mouth and nose, but he took a flashlight directly and couldn't wait to walk in. No rush, no way. Endless has become hanging over him at the moment. No, the sword of Damocles, hanging over the entire earth, could fall at any time, giving the world a tragic threat. It has not been used for many years, the entire underground secret room is rusty, and all kinds of reptiles can be seen everywhere. There are also many weapons left by X-Men, but now those things have long been covered with heavy dust and cobwebs. You can also see various pictures of X-Men players hanging on the walls. Also included are photos of Wolverine, Logan and Phoenix, among others. But these photos are also covered with dust. Nick. When Fury saw these things, he didn't stop too much, just swept them casually, and hurried on. The men behind him quickly followed. I wondered in my heart, although this bureau chief was also vigorous in the past, but many movements were thoughtful and calm. Why does it feel a little anxious and flustered this time? And Nick. Fury was also in no mood to pay attention to the 527 doubts behind him. Walk quickly along the passage to the depths of the underground secret room. It wasn't until I came to a round iron gate that also had an X sign that I stopped. Nick. Fury used the flashlight in his hand to shine a light on the combination lock on the door, and reached out to press it to find that it was still running. Immediately narrowed his eyes, and ordered in a deep voice, "Open the door." "Yes, boss." The S.H.I.E.L.D members behind them noticed each other, and after answering the phone, their mood became more and more bad. I didn't dare to say anything more. Immediately pick up a special device specially used to break the combination lock and walk to the door to prepare to unlock it. A few minutes later, Nick, seeing that the door was still closed, Fury couldn't help but say a little anxiously, "Can it be opened?" "It can be opened, but because this lock is left by Professor X, it is a bit difficult to unlock and will take some time." The S.H.I.E.L.D. member in charge of unlocking was a little nervous when he heard this, wiped his sweat, and replied, "As soon as possible." Nick Fury also noticed that his performance was a little gaff, took a deep breath to stabilize his attitude, and didn't say more. Another 10 minutes passed. Click. The unlock sounds. "Boss, it's on." The member of SHIELD, who unlocked the lock, breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Just though Nick Fury didn't say anything, but kept staring at him gloomily. It put a lot of pressure on him. "Hard work, Nick." Fury said condolences, but his hand was a little impatient to reach out to the round door in front of him. Squeak. The door opened slowly. "Welcome back." This time, there was no smell of decay wafting from behind the door, replaced by white lights and the sound of Professor X. Sure enough, it is worthy of gathering a few of the smartest minds to build a machine, which has not been maintained for so many years, and it can still operate normally. Nick. Seeing this, Fury's heart that had been nervous relaxed a little, and the pressure in his heart was much relieved. The other side. With the whole door fully open, everything behind the door suddenly came into view. A huge spherical space with white walls. There is only a long bridge that extends from the entrance to the center of the spherical space. At the end of this long bridge, a silver helmet connected to several lines is quietly placed. This is the brainwave strengthening machine designed by former Mutant director Beast Hank, and created by Charles and Magneto Eric. Nick Fury looked at the well-preserved device in front of him, and a smile finally slowly appeared on his face. "Endless," I said. "It will make you pay a terrible price for your actions. Everything in the world is changing, and there doesn't seem to be anything that lasts forever. Even the speed of time varies under the difference in gravitational attraction. And when Ancient One and S.H.I.E.L.D. were both interested in Endless, he and Wanda have returned to Wheelhead Manor in New York City. Meanwhile, after contact, Kim sent someone to send clues about the Atlanteans. Some people say that they have seen some primates with scales and fish gills on the south coast, and after approaching, they almost look like humans. Some people call them monsters of the South China Sea, and they are afraid to avoid them, and they show extreme disgust and fear whenever they mention them. There are also people who say that they have been helped by those strange beings, but their words are full of gratitude." Endless read the information in his hand and thought thoughtfully. Now it seems that those who live on the south coast are indeed Atlanteans. From the information at hand, it can be roughly judged that the reality is the same as in the comics, and the Atlanteans yearn for peace and do not desire to participate in war. It was only due to the pollution of the sea caused by human beings that there was a war on land. Definitely, it seems that nothing like this has happened in this universe yet. Endless read all the information again and couldn't help muttering. Moreover, according to the clues investigated by Jin's people, the group of Atlanteans living on the south coast seems to have a kind attitude towards other races and is very communicative. Thinking. He put away the file. There was no rush to reach out to the Atlanteans. So much ability has been gained in just a few days. As well as the Kryptonian bloodline, the Hulk bloodline, and the Asgard royal bloodline, 3 bloodlines that can be called perverted. He needs to digest and recuperate for a period of time to bring out the strengthening effect of these bloodlines to the best state. Thereupon, the next period of time, Endless didn't go anywhere, staying on the manor all the time sunbathing. Under the sunlight of the full day, all his cells, in the process, are constantly evolving and dividing. Its skin and muscles, bone and internal organs, the density is getting bigger and bigger, and all strength, defense, speed, and various dimensions have made great progress. Meanwhile, Endless also discovered that although the Krypton bloodline still cannot absorb magical energy, it is a bloodline with unlimited potential and the ability to change, and able to manipulate magical energy outside of the body. And it still strengthens the Asgard bloodline, and its bloodline potential is far beyond Thor's before. To be precise, the bloodline that has undergone strengthening has long been not the Asgard bloodline. It's a whole new bloodline. They are integrate. Endless can also feel that in addition to his physical strengthening, even his control over magical energy is also rising. Kryptonian bloodline is really terrifying, it can adapt to everything. Is Endless can't help but sigh. Just imagine what kind of existence a magic master will be. That's his situation now. Thanks to his ability to continue to improve it on the basis of bloodline. That is, the situation is now. Endless copied the bloodline they owned from the bodies of Dakeo, Hulk and Thor, respectively. However, after the bloodlines are all in the body, under the interaction of the bloodlines, the effect brought is even stronger than the previous owner of the bloodline. As mentioned earlier, there is now a new bloodline in the body. Ability can help me improve my strength at this stage, and bloodline can improve my future potential. Endless muttered. And when his mind is constantly endless, I tried to make some dim sum, do you want to try it? 35. Then Wanda's soft voice came. Endless turned his head to look over and saw that the girl had also changed into an extremely bold bikini bathing suit, holding a plate in her hand, and walked slowly with red cheeks. Looking at the other party's tender white skin, as well as the girl's extremely mature body, Endless couldn't help but look at it twice, and quietly shifted his gaze to the plate in Wanda's hand. My Wanda is making something delicious today, he asked with a smile. I tried to make mung bean cake, I don't know if it suits your appetite. Wanda put down her plate expectantly and sat down next to Endless. Taste. Her tender white hands picked up a piece of finished pastry and fed it to Endless' mouth. Yes, Wanda is getting better and better, and she will be a good wife in the future. Endless tasted it. The taste was indeed good, and nodded in praise. When nothing else happens, Wanda looks up Chinese recipes online and researches cooking and pastries. The Scarlet Witch of the future now has a taste of approaching a good wife and mother. But think about it too. Wanda seems to prefer days like this to all the thrilling waves. That's why she quit after the Avengers and Thanos ended the final battle and used ability to transform an ordinary town where they could live peacefully. After hearing Endless' praise, Wanda's pretty face suddenly turned even redder. As long as Endless likes it. Her voice was soft, and her eyes rippled with autumn water, and she hoped that it would become more and more inspiring. Endless looked at the shy girl and smiled lightly, reached out and touched the other party's head. Then he suddenly noticed that not far away, Laura was hiding in the doorway, looking at them with half a face full of resentment. Laura has also become more and more well-behaved lately. Endless felt the other party's mood and immediately opened his mouth to praise. The simple Laura immediately smiled and trotted over to share the pastry. Wait until the pastry is finished. Sat down for a while. Pete appeared in the distance. Is Wanda going out for a walk together? He stood in place and stopped, looking at Endless, still afraid to approach. Here it comes. 35. When Wanda heard Pete's words, the smile on her face that had never been dissolved before suddenly sank. Then she put away her plate and asked Endless, "Endless, what do you want to eat at night?" "I went out to buy." "No, anything." Endless looked at the two siblings' obviously hidden expressions, and did not break but smiled. "Good." Wanda also smiled and nodded, went back to the room to change clothes, and quickly went out with Wanda. Endless felt the two siblings leave the confines of the manor, and their eyes flickered. He knew that the two were not simply going out for a stroll. When the two brothers and sisters were talking, their hearts exuded fluctuations that belonged to hatred. In fact, Endless also knows Wanda and Pete, and sneaks out almost every day these days. Probably thinking about how to find Tony. Stark takes revenge. It seems that we still have to find a proper opportunity to explain their misunderstanding with Stark to Wanda Pitt and enlighten them, so as not to affect the psychology of the two children. Endless thought to himself. Then Logan and Charles also came over. "Laura, it's time to go." Logan beckoned raw. "Good." 55. Laura responded, stood up, and looked at Endless. "Endless, I'm going to meet my friends. We made an appointment to play baseball together. See you in the evening." 99. "Well, pay attention to safety on the road and have fun." Endless smiled and nodded. Subsequently, he looked at the back of the three Logan and thought silently, Laura is getting richer and talking more and more after her friends are safe and sound. The thought proceeds here. Endless couldn't help but secretly praise Ginny's efficiency. After picking up the little mutants from the Canadian border, they were quickly basically arranged. Dozens of people. All were arranged to live in a secluded suburb. S.H.I.E.L.D is hard for people to detect. And Logan and Charles, who are also mutant, will also take Laura to find those little mutants from time to time. Definitely. Recently S.H.I.E.L.D also disappeared and they did not reappear near the drenched estate for a long time. Maybe they were really shocked by me. Endless muttered, but quickly frowned. Or, Nick Fury, that guy, is preparing for some big move again. I can't tell, after all, that guy is a sinister guy, I don't think he will give up so easily. But Endless was bathed in the sun, feeling the strength of the three bloodlines. There was not much panic in his heart. And so the days passed. Half a month down. Nothing unexpected happened. Endless' strength has improved by at least half from when he returned from New Mexico. Moreover, as Original's strength became stronger, the bloodline also became stronger, and the speed of improvement was actually accelerating. This is terrifying. The improvement of strength is not that the further you go to the back, the slower it is, but on the contrary, it shows an exponential growth. Thereupon, Endless is in no hurry to do other things, and continues to develop the potential of the bloodline and absorb the energy of Fixed Star. Meanwhile, Logan and Charles take Laura to meet the little mutant again. Life is really comfortable now, and I haven't experienced this feeling for a long time. Logan gripped the steering wheel and couldn't help but be in a trance. Even during the X-Men, his life was never so stable. After all, there are still big and small things waiting for him to deal with. Now, just every once in a while, to send Laura to meet her friends, the rest of the time just like ordinary retirees, what they want to do, unrestrained. It was a situation he had never imagined. I don't know how long such a day can last, but just live the moment. There was a time like this, and it was enough. He laughed. After this period of life, Logan's novelty gradually returned to optimism, and there was no longer the decadent depression of the past. At the same time, Logan knew in his heart that all this was thanks to Endless. Endless is simply the future of the race. Charles in the back row also laughed. Laura nodded repeatedly. It seems that except in front of Endless and her friends, she still doesn't say so much. More than half a month passed quickly. A whole month down. Endless sunbathes every day. As his strength climbed, his body also underwent huge amounts of change. Whether it is the senses of the soul, the density of the body, or the strength, it has more than doubled from a month ago. The already powerful force is getting stronger and stronger. At the moment of Endless, every hair is crystal clear, like ice crystals. The density of musculoskeletal is even higher than diamond. Although the whole body looks fair, and all the muscles are smooth but can only be proportioned, the power contained in these muscles is thousands of times more than it looks from the surface. At the same time, a pair of eyes appear deeper and deeper, and at a glance, you can even feel that a whole universe flows inside, exuding endless power. He just stood there, doing nothing, giving people a majesty like a god coming to earth. From a distance, it is not like a mortal master, but more like a heavenly man. Furthermore, Endless stood by the pool and felt the sun shining on him. The source of constantly fixed star energy, crazy to be swallowed by the whitewashing and madness of the whole body, the body continues to metamorphosis without stopping. He narrowed his eyes slightly and thought about it. Next second, his entire body actually began to slowly become transparent, and then disappeared directly in place. Definitely. Endless isn't really disappearing. Instead, after this period of continuous absorption of fixed star energy, he was surprised to find that he could actually enter the invisible state by controlling the position around his body and distorting the reflection of light. This ability, it seems that even the KO has not mastered it. Immediately after, Endless smiled and muttered to himself, and his body reappeared in place. However, the Krypton bloodline has unlimited potential, and no matter what ability is developed, it is normal. He thought about it and felt the other two bloodlines in his body. It was found that the other two bloodlines had changed, and they seemed to have disappeared. To be precise, they have been catalyzed by this period of time and have formed another new bloodline. It can manically divide cells, intensify the absorption of fixed star energy, increase body density and strength, and continuously breed magical energy. No longer a single bloodline. It's about being completely perfect. I'm so much stronger than Clark now. Endless suddenly sighed, whether it is strength or potential at this stage, as long as there are no accidents, I am afraid he can only follow me forever. The mind settled. He suddenly wanted to test his strength, what kind of thing he could do now. If you want to try, go and try it. Endless followed the idea and flew directly into the sky. Now he doesn't have so much to take care of. Roar. The whole body suddenly turned into a residual image that ordinary people could not see clearly, and flew over the New York City area. There were even 2 sound barriers in front of him. Now I, with all my strength flight, I'm afraid, Li Jiao, has exceeded the speed of sound by more than a dozen times. Not bad. Finish. Endless first tested his speed and how far he could go. After getting the result, he nodded with satisfaction. Subsequently, he turned around, but in just 10 seconds, he was already in front of the mountains outside New York City and landed heavily. Rumble. Endless had just finished telling Flight that his 2 feet had just stepped on the ground. The whole ground shook suddenly. The land within several meters of the surrounding area was shaken into dirt powder and splattered from the ground, and the dust flew up. And Endless doesn't do anything to stay and prepare. Look at the mountains in front of you. His gaze froze. Lift your feet and step forward. Fist. Twist the waist. Swing your arm back. All the muscles tensed in unison at this time, and the big tendons bounced. Punch forward hard. On the fist that Endless pushed forward at supersonic speed, there were even 3 sound barriers. Where the fist passed, Xing Xing was punched out of a vacuum channel. The next moment. Rumble. The terrifying power suddenly broke out at this moment. The endless wind and airflow suddenly swept away, turning into an endless wind blowing in all directions, setting off all the surrounding mountains and forests for thousands of meters to sway with it. The ground is trembling even with the atmosphere. Boom boom. One after another earth-shaking sound. The power on Endless' fist was already like a violent dragon, and like an unstoppable torrent of steel pouring forward to patrol. But in a blink of an eye, the mountain range in front of him was actually bombarded by endless turbulent power, disintegrating inch by inch, and everything on the mountain instantly turned into powder and was blown away. Endless dust and mist tumbled towards the sky. The kilometer-long stretch of mountains was actually falling apart under Endless' punch. It's only been a month, have I become so strong? Endless looked at the vast mountain pit that had just appeared in front of him, and also looked a little surprised and muttered to himself. Such a fast lifting speed. Let him look forward to the future even more. After testing his strength, Endless returned to the drenched manor with a satisfied smile. At this time, he suddenly remembered that he had just thrown a punch casually, but the impact was going to be on the New York news again. With power, the influence also starts to grow. 35. Those who hold the power can change a lot of things and attract a lot of attention. Endless continued to lie back on the lounger by the pool and raised his fist in the sunshine, and my fist can do the same, and even more. Then, he smiled helplessly and shook his head. No, it seems that I have been a little inflated in the past few days. I have to adjust my mentality, there is still a long way to go. If you just set your sights on the earth, then Endless strength is enough now. But looking at the entire Marvel universe, he is still a little inadequate. Even, it is only said that there are some beings on the earth that Endless does not have the ability to enemies, such as the Ancient One magician of Hidden World practice. That said, the Ancient One magician is a good opponent. As long as you can reach each other. Maybe you can get the ability of the other party's Sorcerer Supreme. According to his current ability characteristics, even ability can be perfectly copied. Continue to get stronger. But now Endless is not enough to face the Ancient One. Many people may not know much about Ancient One, but her combat performance is far more powerful than in movies and television. At the moment, the scorching sun is in full bloom, and the sunlight has a majestic fixed star energy sprinkled on his body. All the cells are working hard, transforming Endless' body, constantly strengthening, constantly metamorphosis. Time passes. Until the evening, the remnants of the sun in the distant mountains are only the afterglow left. Endless finished today's sunbathing and stood up. It's time to take another trip to the DC universe and find the Flash. He took a deep breath and made clear his next move. The Flash's supernatural power. True. Today's Endless has copied the abilities of many characters, and several super speeds have been superimposed on each other to push their speed to an extremely terrifying speed. It has even surpassed the speed of sound by more than a dozen times. Moreover, relying on the bloodline in the body, Endless' speed will become faster and faster. But everything grows not overnight, but takes time. And as long as I get the speed power, then my speed can directly skip the long growth process and directly come to a peak. 95. Endless muttered, the thoughts in his heart gradually becoming clear. Although the Flash's ability is relatively single, it only has the power of supervision. But if the other party only talks about speed, it is faster than the KO. That guy can dominate one side with only divine speed. Moreover, at this stage, if you want to compare with the Flash in terms of speed, you can't say that you are slightly inferior to 527, you can only say that it is far from it. After all, the former belongs to the growth type, there is unlimited room for growth, and the potential is endless, but in the end, it still takes time to turn potential into strength. The latter, on the other hand, reached its peak on his debut, with a speed close to the speed of light. Even in the later stage, it can surpass the speed of light and go back in time. Such ability, if Endless can obtain it, can undoubtedly directly bring him great blessings. Rao is Endless himself, and he also began to expect a quick effort. Thereupon, he quickly went to Wolverine Logan and told him that he was leaving for a while. Logan didn't ask too much when he heard this, just said that Endless should go at ease, and he could take care of the manor. Only after Endless left, Logan stood in place, still couldn't help but be curious. I don't know where Endless is going this time, and how powerful he can become after returning. Thinking, he couldn't help but smile wryly and shook his head. Logan prides himself on being the best being in Mutant, not to say the best, but not bad. It was only after coming into contact with Endless that he once again deeply understood how far away he was from the real monster. Last time, Endless was only away for 2 days. After the other party returned, the picture of death and hatred was still vividly remembered. Not necessarily, the next time Endless comes back, he will be able to directly achieve an Omega-level mutant. Logan stood in place and teased, and then prepared to take another break, so he went to pick up the little ones from school. Before Endless saw Wanda addicted to cooking all day, Laura, in addition to meeting friends, was crazy to contact and fight at the training ground. Pete has nothing to do, and he is nervous and doesn't know what he is thinking. Teenage boys and girls who always feel can't be like this. I simply sent a few people directly to the school. This is also the reason why Endless did not specifically inform them when he left. This little guy hasn't finished class yet. DC Universe. Gotham City. In a narrow street, the air suddenly appeared out of thin air, wrinkled and rippled. Then a spatial passage opens. Endless walked out of it. He looked up. I saw that the entire sky was dyed grey by heavy dark clouds. Stepping out of the roadway, the weather is getting colder and colder, the cold wind is not stopping, and there is a lack of pedestrians on the road. Even the homeless people who used to be everywhere on both sides of the road, are much less. All the surrounding buildings seem to be shrouded in grey filters, which appear to lack vitality. This city is really gloomy and depressing as ever. Endless looked at this and couldn't help but sigh. After he enters the DC universe this time, Gotham will appear again because he only left dimensional coordinates in this city and metropolis. Compared to the latter, Gotham is closer to the central city where the Flash is located. That's why Endless chose to come to Gotham again, a city that has been absent for more than a month. After coming out of the alley, Endless walked along the road and bought a newspaper at a newsstand. He glanced at it and saw that it said Hot Mayoral Candidate Harvey Dante dies, and his sister Jessica succeeds in office. Ha! Endless was a little surprised when he saw this news. How is the plot going different from what I know? Because of my appearance, did you cause the butterfly effect? He thought, flipping through the newspaper in his hand. I didn't expect Jessica to take over the mayor's position. I don't know Harvey either. Will Dante become a two-faced? At this time, Endless noticed a photo of Jessica in the newspaper. On the delicate face of the latter, there is a slight burn on the left. It is estimated that when he saved his brother Harvey, he accidentally burned. Endless looked at the photo twice more and deduced in his heart. Just when he was in a state of thought, a familiar voice sounded in his ears. There is also an equally familiar fragrance that accompanies it. The hand was also gently held. Sir, my generation is following. Can you help me and pretend that my boyfriend will intimidate them? The voice trembled, and Choo-Choo was pitiful. Unfortunately, Endless didn't even turn his head when he heard the sound. He already recognized the owner of the voice. Selina, are you really unbehaved, and you came out to deceive people again? Moreover, it is still the same old way. 35. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, with a mockery in his eyes. Endless. When Catwoman saw this familiar face, her complexion couldn't help but change suddenly. I never imagined that I would meet Endless again in the same way. However, it is no wonder Catwoman. When they first met, although Endless at that time already had super strength from Wolverine, the whole person looked more slender and thin, and there was nothing special about his temperament. And now Endless not only has 3 more powerful bloodlines in his body, but the whole person has undergone a month-long transformation under the action of bloodlines. The figure is well proportioned, the skin is delicate and fair, and the whole person exudes a noble and majestic aura all the time. Therefore, the moment Catwoman saw Endless back, she didn't think about the terrifying teenager with ability. And treat each other as a good fat sheep. Outcome. Reality is always so dramatic, unexpected. Endless, I haven't seen you for a long time. When Catwoman discovered that the fat sheep she was eyeing turned out to be Endless, many things flashed through her mind for a moment. Then, she smiled and greeted the other party. At the same time, he quietly withdrew the hand holding Endless. However, Endless only exerted a gentle force, and Catwoman found that her hand was held dead by iron tongs, and she couldn't move. It seems that you still haven't learned to be obedient. Endless stared at each other, seemingly smiling. It's better to find a place and let me teach you something. Catwoman heard his visibly flirtatious tone, and her cheeks suddenly flushed a little. But then it reacted quickly. Endless is still a few years younger than me, my big sister, can still be bullied by this kid. In any case, you can't lose in momentum. So, Catwoman directly raised her chin with perfect lines, revealing a snow-white neck. Endless, you are so young, is it disrespectful to the elders to do this? It doesn't matter, I don't care about this kind of thing. Endless shrugged, the smile in his eyes thickened. Besides, sometimes one Isan is more exciting. Damn. You lustful little devil. Last time I knew you looked at me wrong. 35. Catwoman was ashamed and angry when she heard this. Her cheeks flew with to blush, she gritted her silver teeth, and raised her hand to hit Endless. Which thinks? The hand was just half waved out. The snow-white wrist was directly grabbed by Endless. Pull again. Catwoman leaned over to him. Hit someone. Kittens can't be so unbehaved, this has to be taught a lesson with a small leather whip. Endless looked at Catwoman's constantly vibrating brown eyes very closely, and teased. The latter felt the breath sprayed on his face, and his body suddenly tightened, remembering the scene when Endless took the whip a month ago. Suddenly, he felt even more embarrassed, and the blush quickly spread to the base of his ear. At the same time, I regret a little why I chose this road after going out today, and I met Endless so badly. Catwoman found that as long as she met this guy, nothing good would happen. Moreover, she is also a person who has been in the city of Gotham for many years. It's hard for Catwoman to always be ugly in front of a teenager who is far less old than herself. Thinking of this, Catwoman wanted to say something cruel in shame, signaling that she was actually not easy to mess with. When facing Endless' deep black eyes, Catwoman directly felt that she was being stared at by an extremely powerful natural enemy, and even her body was a little soft, but she did not dare to continue when the words came to her mouth. Look at the wrist that has been grabbed and feel the temperature coming through the skin. She remembered Endless' previous tough performance. For a while, Catwoman's cheeks were even redder, her legs were a little soft and it was difficult to keep standing. In the end, he couldn't say anything. Just a soft hum in the throat, don't overdo it. Endless looked at the woman's red cheeks and smooth side face lines, and smiled softly. He immediately let go of his hand and did not continue to tease. This thing is good in moderation, it cannot be done overnight, otherwise it will backfire. Seeing this, Catwoman quickly pulled away and stared at Endless with a wary face. Then, Endless' expression calmed down. Has anything noteworthy happened in Gotham recently? Catwoman opposite, staring at Endless cautiously. After observing it and confirming that the latter seemed to be really serious, he paused, and immediately said, Gotham has been very normal recently, and there are crazy people who continue to stage crazy moves every day. 399. Is this called normal? Endless raised his eyebrows when he heard this, and then chuckled, well, this is indeed a normal thing for Gotham. 99. Say, Endless, how did you change so much in a month? Don't inquire about adults and children. Obviously you are the child. Ha! Just as the two were talking, a luxurious car slowly stopped on the side of the road. The car door opens. A handsome man with a burly and tall body immediately got out of the car. The man is dressed in a luxurious suit, although Endless does not understand the value of clothes, but the suit on the other party, whether it is from the workmanship or the material, you can know it just by looking at it. Very expensive. Meanwhile, the man's gestures also exude an ability and elegance that exudes from his bones, and his temperament is extraordinary. And this man is Bruce Wayne. At this moment, Gotham has not yet entered the night. And he has not yet put on his Batman armor and become the Batman feared by the sins. Bruce now. Wayne is the young master of the Wayne Group, the richest man in Gotham City, and the most famous playboy. Bruce. Didn't expect to see you here. Endless smiled and waved raw. At the same time, he discovers that Bruce. Since Wayne got out of the car, there has been a sadness between his eyebrows. It doesn't seem like Bruce Wayne's style. After all, the other party sets himself up during the day, but the wanton playboy, such a talent is different from Batman at night. Bruce Wayne at the moment, the performance at this moment is very different from the past. Endless estimated that the other party had encountered something very tricky that would cause Bruce Wayne, the character who seems to be forever troubled by the outside world, has been affected. Endless. Bruce. When Wayne heard the voice and raised his head to see that it was Endless, his originally deep eyes suddenly lit up. Long time no see. He immediately responded with a smile. Bruce. What Wayne didn't say was that for the past month, he had been waiting for Endless to appear. As a result, the other party seemed to have evaporated from the world. Even the Metropolitan University said that Endless did not even participate in military training, and even began classes later. I didn't expect to see Endless again on the street of Gotham this time. Then Catwoman also headed towards Bruce Wayne hit raw. They had confessed their identities to each other half a month ago, and the two sides are now true allies. Bruce. He nodded at Catwoman. Then he strode anxiously towards Endless, took a deep breath and the expression on his face sank again, and said in a deep voice. Endless, I have a very urgent matter and need your help. Endless, I have very important matters and need your help. Bruce Wayne had a serious expression on his face when he said this. The look in Endless' eyes even carried a little implore. When Endless heard his words, he felt the other party's anxious emotions and raised his eyebrows. Sure enough, Bruce. What happened to Wayne was a problem that he found difficult to solve. At the same time, after noticing this, Endless' eyes narrowed slightly, and his eyes flickered to reveal doubts. Because in his impression, even if he is still a young man, when dealing with various things, he is far less mature and thoughtful than later, but he is not so at a loss. What the hell is going on? Endless couldn't help but think in his heart so. Only you can help me with this matter now. Bruce. Wayne saw that the teenager in front of him did not reply to himself immediately, and he couldn't help but say anxiously. Endless heard. Glanced up at Bruce Wayne, seeing him with an earnest pleading. Finally, he took a deep breath and slowly said, At least you have to tell me what happened, and then I can answer you if I can help. Yes. Definitely. Bruce Wayne heard Endless' response, his tight brows stretched a little, and he said in a loud voice, Go, don't stand on the side of the road, let's go to the car and say home. Endless looked back at Catwoman, who seemed to be ready to leave at any moment, and then nodded, Get in the car and say. Subsequently, just like Bruce Wayne walked to his car together. And Catwoman in the back originally wanted to find an opportunity to slip away, but after feeling Endless' gaze, his body shook, but he was still forced by the latter's coercion and followed aggrieved. The three got into the car together and closed the door. Bruce Wayne sighed, looked at Endless with complicated eyes, and pleaded in a low tone, Endless, I really have no way now, if you can help me solve the problem, I am willing to pay you 1,000,000 knives. Endless tugged at the corners of his mouth when he heard this, worthy of Bruce Wayne, the man with the money ability. Definitely, at the moment he didn't care about the reward in the latter's mouth, but was curious about what kind of problem could force young Batman to look like this. Bruce, you might as well talk about how I can help you. Endless immediately spoke. Bruce opposite. Hearing this, Wayne sighed, and then said with some heaviness, Jessica, from a month ago, Brother Harvey. After Dante's death, there were mental problems. Jessica. Mental problems. Endless was slightly surprised to hear this, as if in his memory, such a thing did not occur in the DC universe. And no wonder Bruce Wayne would be so anxious. It turned out that the matter involved his former lover. Now he actually has an idea buried in his heart. That was when Gotham no longer needed Batman, he retired to stay with Jessica. It can be seen that Jessica is in Bruce the place in Wayne's heart. The other side. Bruce Wayne continued his story. Obviously Harvey had an accident in the explosion a month ago, but Jessica just felt that her brother was still alive. Yesterday she also said that she received news from her brother that she would start a riot in Gotham tonight. Jessica kept repeating this sentence, and several doctors were helpless. 35. But I don't want to put Jessica in Arkham Asylum for treatment. After all, there are really dangerous maniacs there. What's more, Jessica's current identity is still the mayor of Gotham, and every move has too much impact. That's it, Bruce. Wayne raised his eyes and looked at Endless seriously. So, Endless, the only hope left now is you. Hopefully, you can use that magical witchcraft to help Jessica get back to normal. 55. Bruce. The reason why Wayne has been waiting for Endless to appear and ask the other party for help. It is to think of the moves that the latter used to affect people's minds when dealing with the Riddler before. In addition, in the past 10 years that he has been out, he has heard some similar rumors about mind manipulation. Jean Bruce. Wayne believes Endless has the ability to treat Jessica well. Endless, please. Bruce. Wayne took a deep look at the mysterious teenager in front of him, and his tone became more and more deeply pleading. The other side. Endless felt the blues. Wayne's sincere gaze fell into deep thought. It's not impossible to ask him to help, but you must first know what you can gain in this matter. While this idea sounds selfish, the reality is that if Endless is a person who has nothing to do and no pressure, then out of kindness or pure interest, he can help without hesitation. It's just that what he needs to face now is obviously much heavier than the future of Jessica and Gotham City. Therefore, his time cannot afford to waste too much. Thinking of this, Endless looked up at Bruce. Wayne glanced. I can try to help with this, but I don't want money. As long as you are willing to help me, then you can say whatever reward you need, within the scope of ability. I will try to satisfy you as much as possible. Bruce. Seeing Endless nodding, Wayne immediately breathed a sigh of relief and said repeatedly. More than a decade ago, the government announced that a NASA device had fallen to the North Pole, but organized people to investigate but found nothing. Endless continued to speak at this time. There is such a thing. Bruce. Wayne thought for a moment, then nodded. I read it in the past newspapers. 39. As he spoke, he seemed to understand what the other party meant. Do you need me to find the device dropped by NASA? It is better to let the Wayne Group build one directly. 35. No, I didn't want that device. Endless heard Bruce. Wayne shook his head at his suggestion, and then added, instead, a green stone inside. It's called kryptonite. Although he mentioned the existence of kryptonite, he was not worried that Bruce Wayne would target the stone. After all, the current latter does not know the existence of Daco, let alone what the stone means. For the other party, it is a stone that emits gamma rays. As for Endless, he wanted this stone just in case. This thing has a big role in the DC universe. In the future, go to other universes in DC, which can be used to deal with Superman in other universes. As for Endless himself, he estimated that he was already immune to kryptonite. So it is. 35. Bruce. After hearing Endless's request, Wayne nodded emphatically. No problem, if that thing really exists, I will help you find it no matter what the cost. So we can go now. It can be seen that now Bruce. All of Wayne's thoughts were caught in Jessica's abnormal behavior. At the moment, all I want to do is to heal the other person as soon as possible. Let's go. Now that the deal is done, Endless has no other ideas. Let's settle the matter at hand first. As for Catwoman, she never spoke, sitting obediently next to him. Subsequently, Endless and they followed Bruce Wayne came to the city hall. All the way to the mayor's office. Bruce Wayne walked in front, knocked on the door, and walked in. Just as soon as I entered, Jessica, who was sitting behind the desk, saw that it was Bruce who came in. Wayne and Endless hurriedly put on the mask on the table, covering the scar on the left half of their face. Bruce, I'm busy right now. 39. Harvey will be back tonight. I have a lot to do, I don't have time to bother with your business. Then, she said coldly. Jessica, this is Endless, I think he has the ability to solve your illness. Bruce. Wayne heard the other party's words, his eyes were complicated, took a deep breath and introduced Endless to her with a smile. I don't have any problems, what you do is a complete waste of time. Jessica glanced at Bruce. Wayne looked at Endless again, and the expression on his face suddenly became even more ugly. Bruce. Wayne, why don't you just want to believe me? Bruce. Wayne looked at the other party's reaction, felt a little headache, and looked back. Jessica has not been very cooperative with treatment. Bruce. Wayne. You are getting more and more excessive. You'd better leave quickly, you're not welcome here. And when Jessica heard this, she directly stood up, her eyes sharp and unkind. Then her words pointed directly at Endless, and you, there are no patients here who need treatment, let alone any doctors. Seeing this, Endless smiled lightly and raised his hand. 1. Psychic fluctuations diffused. Next second, Jessica, who still wanted to continue to open her mouth to scold, closed her mouth and regained her calm, and then sat back in her seat without saying a word. Bruce. Wayne's eyes lit up when he saw this, and he suddenly felt that he was looking for the right person this time. This mysterious teenager I know really has the means to treat Jessica well. As for Catwoman, her expression changed, although she knew that the other party would control people's witchcraft, but she still felt creepy when she saw it with her own eyes. The other side. Endless walked slowly to Jessica. The latter also looked back with calm eyes. Jessica, what do you think of Harvey now? How is Dent? Endless asked. My brother is still alive and told me that tonight he will start a riot in Gotham to put the city in flames. Jessica replied calmly. Endless took a deep look at the woman in front of him and sensed the fluctuations in the other party's heart. The other party does not seem to be lying. An idea popped into Endless's mind. Then he stepped forward again and reached out his finger to point at the center of Jessica's eyebrows. He directly invaded the other party's mind. Rumble. Rumble. As the mind entered Jessica's mind, Endless immediately found that there was a sea of fire inside. Buildings, roads, vehicles, plants. Everything was burning with flames, explosions were happening everywhere. the ground was cracking and collapsing all over the cracks. He raised his head and saw no sky, only to see a pitch black rapidly engulfing everything. 0, asking for flowers. 0. The whole inner world is falling apart. Who are you? Then, the figure of Jessica in the inner world appeared in front of Endless. Half of her face was burning with flames, and the skin and flesh under the flames had been burned, exposing half of the teeth and the shape of the facial bones. It's just that the eyeballs are intact. She stared at Endless, but Harvey Dent's voice came out of her mouth. I'm up, you are the guy who was turned into a city hero by the Riddler with Batman. Ha! Hero, I also thought about. But this soil called Gotham is rotten to the core, and there is no suitable place for hero seeds to grow. The tone was frantic and hoarse. When talking on now Jessica's conscious body, half of her face was intact and still beautiful, the corners of her mouth were lowered down, her eyes were full of tears, and she looked sad. On the other side, the face burned by the flames was very hideous and terrifying because it had no skin and flesh, and could not make an expression. Endless saw this and realized that maybe Harvey Dante is dead, but Two-Face is still there. Thinking. He withdrew directly from Jessica's world of consciousness. Let's go, Bruce. Wayne, take me to Harvey. Looking at Dent's cemetery, I needed to confirm something. 35. Endless took a deep breath and glanced at Jessica to Bruce. Wayne said. Now that things have come to such a point, it is true and unexpected for him. The DC universe becomes a do Harvey Dante actually died early. Moreover, such a thing happened to his sister. Endless had nothing but the truth about the matter. There's another speculation. The truth of that matter has more to do with it than the Two-Face and Jessica incident. So now he just wants to go and confirm Harvey for himself first. Dent's life or death, then decide. And Bruce. After listening to Endless' words, Wayne also hesitated. It is not clear what the latter is doing. However, he glanced at Jessica, who had regained her composure, and thought that maybe it was a special need for witchcraft, so he didn't say anything more. Okay, let's go. Bruce. Wayne nodded. Then he left the government building with Endless and Catwoman. When everyone walked out the door, the afterglow that belonged to the evening has disappeared, and Gotham is once again immersed in the thick ink of the night. Endless and the others quickly drove to the cemetery. From it was found the burial of Harvey Dent's grave. Except for Bruce Wayne the entire cemetery fell into silence, no one around, everywhere was dark. Let's go. Endless picked up the shovel he had prepared on the way over and shoveled it towards Harvey Dent's grave. Before starting to excavate, he had already determined that there was no trace of anyone turning it over. Raw. Bruce on the side, although he did not understand what Endless' move meant. But out of trust in the latter, just after taking a long breath, Raw also picked up the shovel and began to help. Catwoman behind the two looked at them strangely. Looking around the dark and quiet cemetery, she only felt that this mysterious Oriental teenager was not normal. Catwoman didn't understand his move, but was shocked. However, in the worry of Endless witchcraft, she still did not dare to say anything. Sand. Soon. At night, in the dark cemetery, Endless and Bruce were left. The sound of Wayne constantly shoveling away layers of dirt. The shovel in his hand is constantly rubbing against the dirt. In the process, Endless has also been identifying whether there is anything special about this soil. However, nothing else was found. The dirt in which the coffin was buried is also normal dirt, and it has been almost a month since no one has touched it. Clang. Finally, the shovels in the hands of the two finally touched the coffin buried under the dirt. Then, Bruce Wayne glanced back at the tombstone, which showed a black and white photo of Harvey. Dante was expressionless, as if watching them. Endless, are you sure you want to open it? Do you really use dead man's corpse in your witchcraft? 99. He finally couldn't help but ask. Open it. Endless nodded, did not explain much, and his eyes became more solemn. Okay, listen to you. 35. Hearing this, Bruce didn't say anything more, took a deep breath and stretched out his hand towards the coffin lid. Roar. The night breeze blew and the coffin lid was slowly lifted. With the scene inside the coffin, little by little, Bruce Wayne was stunned. How? How so? He subconsciously took a step back, a little unable to believe the shock of his eyes. Raw spoke. For a while, what Jessica had said before began to pass through his mind over and over again. Then, the Catwoman next to him couldn't hold back his curiosity and came up, and as a result, he also narrowed his eyes slightly, and his eyes flickered. Belongs to Harvey Dent, inside the coffin that has been buried. That's it guys, hope you like this video. Like, share and subscribe the channel if you want more videos like this. Also tell me in the comment section down below if you have any recommendation about what I should make next. Thanks for watching.